very maybe strange question to ask everybody that I didn't warn anybody about in the beginning. And then there's some tech and other news going on in game development that we're going to discuss along the way. I think there were quite a few interesting topics that everybody kind of shared before the stream that we're going to dive into, and a lot of questions that were submitted. If you have a question, there's still a little bit of time to submit it if you're watching live. Just go down to the link in the description below and submit it. And while you're here, hit the like and subscribe button. So thanks, guys, for coming out. It's awesome everybody being here again. Happy to have everyone here. Anybody got any big announcements or anything you want to share before we jump in and get started?
Thank you, everyone, because Terraria won the Labor of Love.
That is true. Yeah, Terraria won that. That was the Steam Awards, right? Labor of Love one?
Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, you have no idea. I didn't ever believe we would actually make it, and it was like I woke up, I saw the message that we won, and I was like started to cry, and I have a problem with my nose, so it started to bleed, and I was still in bed, and I'm like, ah. But it was wonderful. I was so grateful.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, congratulations again. So the Labor of Love winner. That was for just like essentially continuing on the game after release and making it so much better and not abandoning it, right? It's one of the games that's had a really long life cycle. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's been 10 years. So
yeah, that's definitely a long time to keep a game running. It's not an MMO.
A lot of commitment to the same code.
Anybody else? Dave, you got anything? You had a video coming out today, right?
So yeah, I put out the video last week. Was a new tutorial after the show, and then there was a poll during the week, and people chose the next tutorial in the series, which is going to be, I can't even remember because I haven't looked. Having a dialogue with Unity.
Oh.
It's about writing good modal dialogues. So that's coming out. It was really close this week, but it just took it. I think a lot of people.
So I'm going to quiz in advance. Do you go for the array of hidden buttons option, or do you dynamically build the buttons, or do you have different subsets, or do you have a master modal, or do you do different ones? What's your approach?
I show both. So I show how you use Unity's basic ones that they provide with some extra options that are hidden that nobody knows about on the dialogue boxes whenever I ask them. And then I show how to just build a basic dialogue box well. So things like capturing input, taking focus, and all the rest of that sort of thing. So that will be coming out after this stream. The other video I popped out is the motion simulator. So a lot of people have been asking just to show the pitch to you and everything on the motion simulator. So I put out a video this week, and I'll post a link in the chat, that just shows I built a Unity scene that has a really nice version of the chair, and you can actually move it around and shows how the chair actually moves around. The simulator that's behind me, I never go the right way.
It's a small thing, but I like the fact that you did the axis curves as real-world handles with spheres. I was like, it's a nice touch. It's kind of like actual in-world relevance.
Yeah, I had a very, to be honest, this I kind of say, oh, it's the scene that we use, and actually it's just a little bit cleaner than the scene that we use because I changed it and made it a little bit tidier than we had sliders before, and I was like, oh no, I've got to make those look proper.
I used to do that with a client project where you demo a panel and it's like, oh, here's just the demo scene that we use for testing, and like in the meantime between the few hours of the demo I like add between fades and animations and stuff. I don't do that for my own stuff, but just before you show it you make it slightly fancy.
Yeah, it's got to look a little bit nicer. So if you jump forward a bit, Jason, this is just talking about what the project is, and then yeah, there you go. So that's the actual chair, and it talks about the different things, roll, pitch, and yaw. And I don't go into surge, heave, and all the rest of the things, which are a combination system of all of them. But it just shows it actually running and the chair moving around with 20 degrees of motion. I took the arms off because they tend to flail about a bit if I haven't, because I've just got some standard roping on there at the moment to hold them in place. But I'm going to do some 3D printed mounts to keep the arms in place when it usually is. So you can see behind me, the arms are back. I always lean the wrong way. The arms are back on it now. But yeah, this is without the arms because it's just easier to show. But yeah, so that's up on the channel as well.
And did you make that display of the ranges of motion in Unity too?
Oh, what, the chair? The diagram?
Yeah.
That's all Unity. Yeah, it's all Unity.
And how did you do the rendering there? Just asking out of curiosity, the lines and the balls, the showing the
Okay,
sliders.
so yeah, I can go through that.
Sketching the
Yeah.
outlines.
So the grid that's actually on the bottom is a cheat because it's a texture. It's not actually. It's a repeating texture. So I don't use too much fucking memory with it being huge. But it's a repeating texture rather than me doing lines and OpenGL and because I used to use a lot of OpenGL based on the camera. So I used to do a component, put some OpenGL code into it, stick it next to the camera component, and then it'll render out in scene. And that's how I used to do all my lines. But then with this, you get the nice fade off to the distance. And then I select the camera and I build I use solid color selection on the camera. And then I use a color picker at the very back. And I do that after I've layered all the post-processing and everything on the camera because this is a URP scene. So I do all the post-processing with the bloom, vignette, and all the rest to make it look really pretty. As Jason's story says, I don't do this normally, but this is when it's pretty. And then I do a color picker and then I pick the solid color and that makes it look like it fades out to the background.
Yeah, I've done the same. I noticed for VR, we did a project way back when called Dispatch, and it has a very line-oriented design. And we tried all of the usual stuff, graphics, drawings. We used all sorts of other crazy stuff. And it ended up being, providing the lines are thick enough that you don't get those weird flickering issues in VR, use a texture, and if you have a solid color background, it looks like a fog fade off, and you don't have to pay the cost of the performance for the. It's exactly the same. It gets you 70% to 80% of the way there, and you don't need the entire fog layer and all the other complexities that go with it.
It is so much cheaper to do it this way, optimization wise. And it comes out beautiful in the end. And all the demo scenes that you see me running in VR use this same system, a grid texture on the bottom. And I have a dark version and a light version. And then I just select the post-processing I'm going to use unless I'm running into the VR itself, and then I don't put much on. And then for the handles, so the handles are actually canvases. Well, they're canvases with spheres on top of them. So the canvas to start off with actually uses a fill. So it's a full circle that I just then run the fill to limit the amount of thing, because then I can change, depending on the simulator type or depending on the motion of the simulator, I can change the fill of the ring on the canvas, and that raises or lowers the amount that's there. So it's a really cheap way and quick way to produce a little curve there for you. And then what I do is I have a center point on that canvas, and then I offset the sphere that you see there onto that center point on the canvas to then stick in between. And then it has a min and max range that the sphere can move to, and it keeps it in there. So there's actually, where you're pressing, it sets a point, and then it uses a system to basically work out where that point is relative to the origin, and then places the sphere at an offset relative to that origin within a minimum and a maximum. And that's why you get those little things. And then to make sure the raycasts are going to the right thing, there's actually a canvas event type. So where the lines are, that uses a canvas event that when you press and do the drag, that then speaks to the axis handle that moves it. And then that then in turn speaks to the motion simulator. And then when you let go of that, the motion simulator returns back its return to zero, because on this demo, the motion simulator will return to zero after it, or the origin point after you finish dragging. Though I don't do that in game, obviously, because it would not go with the scene. But when I end a game, I have the simulator actually slowly return back to zero while you're watching the end credits or whatever. So that when you actually take the headset off, you're like, oh, I was actually there, and now I'm actually at the origin point and I can move off the simulator.
I wonder if people would be interested in a video on how you do that, do the UI part there. It seems like something that would apply to a lot of people wanting to do UIs like that.
The thing, it's not an optimal way of doing it. But for this scene, it doesn't really matter. It's just a very easy way of doing it.
It probably doesn't matter for
layering loads of canvas, and there's transparency in there and all sorts of things. But I mean, if people are interested in that, I'm happy to produce a video and show how the math works as well for doing that. Circle theory and all the rest. I noticed you posted on one of my community posts that you want more math videos, and I was like, oh, fucking math videos, go somewhere else. But yeah, so I could, if everybody's into that, I'm happy to put more of that sort of thing up.
I think they're good when they're really specific to solving a problem. Like the math videos that work for me are like, here's a problem and here's the math solution to solve it. Instead of just like, here's a concept and here's how you would figure this out. Like you had to give the use case for why you would want to figure it out too. So to just it I feel like it's a lot easier to retain and make more sense of it if you can put
I
it
do think
into a
there's a
game
missing
concept.
gap in particular for the plane class. A lot of people don't know there's a literal class called plane that you can project on it, and it does a lot of
Yep.
simplifies a lot of complex math stuff. And I feel like somebody should do a video on that. But before someone says it, I'm not a math guy. That's not my. It's never going to be my purview. So I'm only putting it out there as an idea. It is never going to be my video. Putting it out there already.
So there
Maybe-
is the plane class is actually used in that video you just saw. So when it does the raycast onto the point that gets put onto the plane, it's the plane get closest point to, and that just uses a straightforward plane that takes the canvas and takes the forward and the up from the canvas, and then works out the plane from that, and then you get the point from there, and that relates back. So yeah, plane class is awesome, and people should jump into it because it really can save you a hell of a lot of effort, because I've seen people try and write it themselves because they just don't know it exists. Because Unity has a very there's a lot of for them to teach, but it skips a lot of things that are considered advanced but are very interesting and good for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's a similar like Perlin noise and stuff. The amount of times I'm like, oh, let me go find a Perlin noise algorithm. It's like, no, there is one in Unity. You just have to know where these things are because they don't tell you.
To be fair, they're like very easy to find with IntelliSense, and also usually if you want to get good with shapes, just look up the shape name and you'll often find a plethora of interactions with other shapes, like planes interact with rays and rays interact with meshes and meshes. Yeah.
Well, I think your
Yeah.
example that you have there is probably a good one to show like planes in a practical example of how you could use them, why you would use them, and how it works to solve like a real problem. It'd probably be a really good video. Yeah, you should do that, Dave. I like your idea, Jason,
I,
of Dave
I
do a
remember-
planes video.
The other one too is the projecting a point on a line. So whenever you're doing stuff like I don't know, you've got a path and you're trying to have something follow a path and you want to arbitrarily have it follow it to the nearest enemy or target, or you're doing steering behaviors. That's another one which is like, it's actually surprisingly simple, but for people like me who are completely rubbish at math, you go on a big panic attack trying to find the solution. And you're like, no, there's like project point online is only a relatively simple thing to do. And it's how you do a lot of those 3D handled connected stuff. And it's quite straightforward once somebody shows it to you.
I've actually got a friend who's a mathematics teacher, and he often emails me and asks, I'm teaching this particular thing in math. Where is it used? Like, I need examples, because the kids pay more attention when you give them examples of what that sort of thing is. And someone just mentioned Freya's channel on the chat. Yes, definitely. She is like super advanced version of mathematics. She's very
The Bezier stuff, the shader stuff,
it's
a lot of
if you want to get into math and shaders, she is like probably the best one I've seen on YouTube so far. Definitely. But yeah, he contacts me all the time and says, we need this. Like one of them was circle theory. Like he goes, where the hell are people using circle theory in math? And funnily enough, I turned around to him and said, actually, I've just written something that uses it for corralling horses into a stable on a video game. And he's like, what? And I was like, well, you asked, so there it is. And the things like people ask about imaginary numbers. How are we going to use imaginary numbers? What are they used in? And electricians use it. So, and I'm not going to go into that because I can't remember why, but I know they do. So look it up. But yeah, it's something to do with that.
Oh man.
I actually wanted to say that when I saw the handles that you made, I hoped that you'd say that you used shapes for them, Freya's asset, because it looked like it would be that.
Yeah, with a lot of that stuff, I wish I did use more of those assets, but to be honest, I write them so often, I just like go into automatic, put the code in and be done with it and move on, because they break in certain circumstances and things like that. But because they don't break in the circumstances I use them for, I don't care. So
well, I have the eternal problem that if I wanted to share something with somebody, if I use shapes, I have to have them have the asset. If I just create my own PSD file with a bunch of sprites and then make my own world space UI, I can share it. It's a bit jankier, but at least I have complete usage of that. And until Unity figures out some way for you to license a thing across that other people can use it or read on, until they figure something out, I literally have the assets that I enjoy using. I just have to train myself not to use, which is a real bummer.
And yeah, shapes and Freya, that asset. If you're even just learning about how to use shapes and everything, it's just will blow your mind. So I think everybody should have that in their arsenal of asset store things. But yeah, I have the same problem as you, Story. The commissions that I do and everything for art and things like that, you're like, oh, okay, I can't really use certain ones of these because they want the base code with it. So I have to tell the clients they're going to buy these particular assets themselves to have seat licenses for those particular things. It's just a pain to do that. So often at times I'll just reproduce it if it's short. Some things like I did some stuff for the Super Bowl, and that needed recording stuff. So there's some really good on-screen recording things from, I can't remember the asset, but I can't remember. It's like Pro Recorder or something, but they're excellent for streaming out of Unity. So I had to get the client to buy that because I'm not about to write my own stuff for that because that'll take forever.
So we've done that with, I think it's AV Media Pro or something.
That's the one. Yep. That's the one I was thinking. I couldn't remember the name.
The amount of times clients want some, especially with VR, when you want to have some 3D projected UI or screen or something, we're like, okay, this asset ain't cheap. It's like 100 or 200, depending on the context and what you're using it for and their horrible multi-platform licensing, so whatever. But it's either that or we're going to tack on 2 months, write it from scratch and charge you for it. And quite frankly, you don't want that. We don't want that. Let's just move on and buy the asset,
Yeah. Oh, I did another thing this week as well. I'd done a video on somebody else's channel this week where I talked about VR and how
I
to
saw
get
that
into
you were
VR.
doing an interview, right? I didn't get to watch the thing yet, though. You
Yeah,
send the link so we can check that out after the stream too. I guess since you're not releasing the other video this week, everybody can go check that out.
Well, I'll have a video out after this.
Oh, you will? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, there'll be a tutorial video on dialogues after this. But yeah, so here I'll pass it into the chat and you can put it out there. So Dinesh Puni from Immersive. I basically went and done a video with him because it's from I won his game jam last year, VR game jam, because I had some time and I love game jams. So I went on and done a conversation with him about how to get into VR and tips on how to build code really quickly to get started on a VR game jam. Because, of course, your first 10 hours of your VR game jam is just getting everything going with the hands and head and all the rest and making it look pretty before you even start out, because you want to rig a nice hand and you want to have that going. So if you're doing everything from scratch, getting that going is quite hard. So I gave him a little talk and told people how to do that.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna guide them through like the quick setup to get started with a character or a VR project and actually turn it into a game.
That's right. Yeah. So him and Justin Barnett did the game jam, which was a very good game jam. And they both have their own channels and they're really good at teaching beginning on VR and AR.
Nice. Everybody check that thing out. I wanted to ask you guys all a question real quick, if it's okay, before we get started with other people's questions and the other things. And it was in the title here about the first times. So what had me thinking about it is we got a baby in the house again, a 3-month-old who keeps doing like new things for the first time all the time, and it got me thinking. I have no idea how about the first time writing code. Like the first time I actually wrote code. The thing about like all the things the kids have done their first time, and like, they've all written a little bit of code, at least a little bit. And I was just kind of curious. It reminded me of like when I first started writing code and what got me into it, which was my uncles. I just happened to have an influence around who kind of taught me. They're like, hey, well, you don't have any games to play on this computer, but you could try making your own or something, and it kind of got me inspired. And and got me going. And I was curious, like for you guys, what was like the catalyst, like the first thing that made you start coding? Like when you went from like I've never written any code to hey, that was cool or whatever it was.
I mean, I can share because I remember it pretty clearly, but it wasn't the first thing I've done in the category that I went into. I started by modding games, and I initially did it by finding an art file that was used in a game, and I just opened it in MS Paint and I drew on it, and it was reflected in the game, and I was like, oh my god, that is awesome! I want to make more. And I ended up figuring out there is a data editor for the game, and it had every frame of every character that's fighting with unique states and everything in XML. And I was like, this is code. This is awesome. And I started editing it. So like hitboxes were giant, and I would hit everything on screen at once, and it would deal 1,000,000 damage. And that was really fun. And I thought that was coding at the time because I was a kid, and of course I didn't know any better. So I enjoyed my markup for a good 2 years. Then it went into Game Boy emulator and memory editing, where I ended up following some stupid tutorial, and it ended up teaching me how to change instructions instead of just editing memory values in a game. And that was that. And then the most unimpressive way, school had us choose the classes that we want to specialize in. And I went for computer science, obviously. And they were like, okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to write these 2 lines of code and you're going to print hello world. And I'm like, okay. And I ended up just not. I ended up being sick for the first class that we were supposed to do that, but I ended up reading the entire manual for the entire year of programming in the time I was sick. And I just came in and I was like, okay, I'm making a class and I'm doing it was really funny, but
Oh,
so
is
yeah.
that was in school, your like high school or
10th grade. I'm not sure how you call it. High school?
yeah. Yeah, 10th grade, yeah. Wow. That's awesome. What about you, Dave? Yours was much older,
my
I'm sure. Do you
my
still
old
remember it?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I got reminded of it recently when I went back home, and my mum was sorting through all these old pictures and showing really embarrassing pictures to my wife that I won't detail. But one of the ones that was not embarrassing as such, but was a reminder to me is the fact that in the room we used to have in the corner an old like Apple II, Apple III computer. And my dad was an engineer for simulation back in the day, the big giant simulators that they taught people on. And he still, when he was alive, he still used to recall to me about the fact that he used to have these giant model sets that they used to fly cameras through. And they used the camera visual on big bloody great CRTs in the simulator from these giant model sets. Like you could get a job just as somebody who actually built physical models for landing planes. And he recalled to me, and he used to show me these things when I was a kid. He used to take me into work, and I used to look at these giant simulators and punch cards and all the rest, and he used to tell me about the history of it. But my mother showed me, and it actually had writing on the back, me sitting there, right, and you could see that I'm writing lines of code. And not code. It was just like math, like so and so and so and so, go to so and so and so and so, go to so and so, and just writing these pages. And I was 8 at the time. So I was 8 years old. I was writing these lines of code for this. And that's what I used to do when I was a kid. My dad used to drag me off the street and teach me how to do electrical engineering, plumbing, whatever, tiling. Like I just done all the tiles in my utility room because my dad dragged me off the street from playing with my friends. That's probably why I'm such an antisocial asshole. But then
You have a lot of projects too, though.
too right. My first actual memory was about 12, and it was Amos Basic, and I was trying to make Duck Hunt. But with a mouse. So I was making Duck Hunt. So I was building all the sprites, and then writing the code that let them across the screen, and done all the rest of it, and then finding out what the mouse was and pressing on that. Amos Basic, and then I got Amos 3D. So that's the Amiga operating system.
Nice. That's really cool. What about you, Jason?
Well, we went through this. There's a video on your channel where we did like a 20-minute deep dive into my backstory of how I got into programming. But the general takeaway is, funnily enough, I never wanted to be a programmer when I was younger. Um, I was just the computer kid. It was one of those things where, to me, whenever anything broke, people assumed whether it's a VCR or a microwave or whatever, they would vaguely throw it in my direction and say, "You do computers and you can fix this." And all it meant was I could read instructions and digital screens didn't scare me. And that's apparently enough to get you started. And so I just found myself in various scenarios being the computer guy. And the bit that particularly stood out is um, the local library. I used to go there and read a lot, so it was more reading than anything to do with computers. But they had a wall of computers at the back, and you could sign in and get half an hour of time. And then once I started using the computers, I'm like, oh, this is unlimited information. I started learning about websites like the Temple of the Screaming Electron, for people who remember those, and getting all of this really interesting information I could take back to school with me, like how to get into the developer menus on vending machines and give yourself free cans of drinks and things. And once you start realizing the internet gives you this kind of power, I got hooked and I started just going down that rabbit hole. The first sort of foray into making my own stuff, though, was Angel Fire, where you could make your own free websites. And so I made a free website, and I was at the time making a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan website. And I ended up just being me ripping a lot of images from other sites, because again, it felt like a magic trick. You could go to someone else's website, view the source code, and steal links to images and things, and go, I can just amalgam whatever I want together. And the closest to a language I first learned was DHTML, because every other website was using this boring HTML stuff, but they didn't realize there's dynamic HTML, and you can have really horrible mouse cursors that have all of these animated crap on them that for some reason inspired me because it was so interesting and no one was doing it. I did that for a bit, and then at this stage, I'm like resigned to being the computer guy. And again, by computer guy, I mean someone's computer's not working, so I go to their house and run defragger or something. Like, we're not talking high skill here. We're just like, nobody in a small Irish town even understands what computers are, and so to them, it's magic. And so when the time comes to decide what I do for a living, it's like, I mean, I might as well take the next leap in that direction. I have no idea if I'm going to be capable at it. I don't know if I have any instinct for it. I have no idea if there's a correlation between hardware-y stuff and programming stuff. So I went in genuinely afraid this is a dice roll. Like, I have no natural intuitive understanding. I'd never done programming. I'd copied and pasted snippets of stuff from other things. But I go into my first year, VB, hate it. But another side class we had was Java. It was JavaScript. No, it was VB and then Java. And so we were doing Java in first year. And then all of a sudden, that's when it clicked for me. And after the first year, I was about the same as everyone else. I wasn't particularly that good at it. But halfway through the first year, I was like, something clicked. And I hit the idea of, I understand what composition and polymorphism is. And once I got that idea, everyone else around me is still sort of noodling with conditional statements. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Everything's there. Like, you're writing scanner equals new scanner. You don't understand. It exists already. They made it using the same tools we have. And I was like, I'm trying to explain the concept that you can see all the code like the Matrix by going in and looking at other people's classes. And I just sort of like started diving down that rabbit hole. And yeah, I ended up getting top of my class in that. And then everything else fell by the wayside. I was crap at databases, crap at all the other stuff. I realized like the basics of just Java was my thing. Long story short, here we are.
Why did they bring VB into schools? Like,
woeful. It was so bad.
That's atrocious. I think it's just because the only thing the teachers could teach. It was so awful.
I actually bought myself a book on Dark Basic, trying to get into games. And it's like, then once you start, it's like, wait, nobody uses this. What am I doing? It's a waste of my time.
Saying that, I remember.
Basic?
Yeah.
Sounds like a... Never mind.
Yeah, Dark Basic was supposedly like the gaming version of Basic, effectively. It goes into more graphic library stuff, and it just wasn't great.
No.
Did it come with a dark theme at least?
I got, funny enough, I got my first proper job outside of like working like in a shop and things like that, and selling computers for a living. My first real job was working using VB, funnily enough, to build front ends for an aircraft parts database system. It was just pay part of my way through university. I basically would just use horrible VB to build the interfaces for the and then write the SQL while there was a guy building the database itself.
Yeah, my first paid code at Intel was VB. Because that's what the other people on the team knew, so that's what we used, and it was also terrible code, but it worked at the time and got the job done. So it automated away our jobs. Right?
Technically,
Basically wrote code to automate our jobs that way.
Technically, the first paid language I ever worked in was in my third year of college. They'd finally moved on to teaching us C#, but they were too late for me because during the previous summer I'd already established I like programming and I taught myself C# over the summer, and because it was X and A at the time, and I wanted to learn games, and they weren't teaching us games, and that's where I got started with that. So by the time the next year started, they're teaching everyone C#, and we have to pick our end of year project. I decided to teach myself ActionScript because I'd learned that ActionScript 2 was a very script heavy language. But at the time, this is the big translation from ActionScript 2 to ActionScript 3. Everyone on Newgrounds is freaking out because they're like, we don't understand object oriented stuff. And I'm like, I got this. I can be like, I can bridge the gap between all of these, the old guard of the ActionScript 2 people and the new ActionScript 3 people with event listeners and all this stuff. And so I start teaching myself that. And one of the other guys decides to not do his end of year project and pay me to do it. And so I say I take a couple hundred and I just secretly do his end of year project. It took me about a week. I did a really simple tower defense game, handed it to him, and yeah. So technically, my first ever paid programming gig was doing someone else's end of year college project for a couple hundred in ActionScript. There you go.
Excellent. The only other time I ever done any VB was a friend of mine. He was a web developer, and he basically got told by his company he had to learn VB. Even though he was never going to use it, he had to learn VB, and he had to take a test in it. So they were giving them tests to make sure they were good at doing VB moving forward. And he didn't want to do it. So he just sent me all the stuff, and I just did it for him for his work so he could pass, because he never would have to do it. But he got in trouble because I corrected something that the examiner had put on the thing. And then the guy turned up. Yeah, and the guy turned up. He's like, yeah, it's interesting. You made a correction to some of the code that I wrote in there. Afterwards, he's ringing me up. He's like, you're a shithead. Why did you do that? I'm like, because I can't. My OCD won't let that pass. It's not going to happen.
I had a similar issue where another friend of mine, I did his project. This is the year after. And I do it, and I try to dumb it down to the point where it's what he would do. But you can't help it. Once you're learning design patterns, you start putting in stuff by accident that you don't realize you're doing. And so when I hand it to him, I say, look, here is a cheat sheet. If you hand this in, they will question you on some of the patterns here that haven't been covered yet. And I gave him a single page document that said, tell them you're reading this book. You don't really understand what you're doing, but you're copying examples from it. That will get you past any issues they have. And he didn't read the sheet I gave him. He didn't say that, and he fumbled, and they knew immediately he didn't do it, and whatever. So I warned him. I gave him the way to get out of the problem, but he just didn't listen.
But that's the problem when they're too lazy to do the work themselves. They're too lazy to read the sheets.
That is fair, but it's a single two-sided thing. I was like, this will get you a C if you just read the piece of paper. But no, I couldn't help him beyond that point. He quit eventually.
I think the moral of this story is, if you want to get more money while you're at university, learn to code before you go to university and help do other people's projects.
Yeah, there you go.
On VB, I have an experience, but it's probably the opposite of what you guys had. In Israel, at least, we have this thing called the Bagrut test, and it's like the finals, I think, for what you have in the US, where you have a big test at the end of your 10th to 12th year. And it's a big test done across the continent, the country, and it's all happening on the same date. Everyone has to be really serious about it, and you get units depending on how difficult each topic you studied was throughout the years. And in computer science, you could go up to 5 units, usually the regular course. And I had to do 2 units in C#, 2 units in C# with some stupid library. And then I had to do 1 more unit. And the unit I chose was Visual Basic. And I did it after I've already finished like everything C# related. So I'm like, I'm going to have to learn Visual Basic. And I had like 1 day before the test date. And I just picked up a book. I copied like all the method names and the syntax. And I just went in and I looked at my cheat sheet. I filled out whatever was needed. I got 100. It was so stupid. Like
And-
putting Visual Basic after you do it of complex
Oh yeah,
spins.
no, that doesn't make sense.
Just
And there's
remember the
there's a
keyword
moral
dim
from
and
that.
you're good to go. That's
Oh,
basically all
yeah.
you need.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hate Visual Basic. I mean, there's a moral to that story as well. Like, if you look at a job and it's got a different programming language on it, like, you might be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've said
really,
in general, I
once
think
I
for
know the
most
logic.
people, it's the first language to do it properly will take you 3-4 years, in my opinion. The second one will take you 6 months. After that, you're about a 3-month maximum between every future language, unless it's really obtusely different. Paradigms cause different shifts. Like if you're going from object oriented to functional, you've got new things to learn.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, language is just syntax, and you're kind of fine beyond that point. I find most things you can pretty easily transition after that stage.
Yeah, I think you learn how to learn languages.
Yeah. There is someone mentioning Techno Ally says, I don't like seeing you guys making fun of Visual Basic. Our company is making 1,800 thousand in systems made in Visual Basic. And I just want to clarify, no one's making fun of Visual Basic as the language. I mean, it's just making code work. It's just the teaching of Visual Basic practices is the
Yeah, I
Ball
learned
here,
how to
I
code
guess.
in Visual Basic, and I mean, not in Visual Basic, actually in Basic on a Commodore 64 before I learned C and assembly and C++ and everything else. And I think there's some value there, but yeah, learning it the opposite direction doesn't make any sense. Like, it's
No.
something you should learn
I've
before
heard
C++
complaints
or C#.
too. I've heard people complain too about Java as well. But we're at the point where people are like, "Why would I learn Java? Nobody uses Java except for ... Minecraft, right?" And I always find it interesting because I have the unpopular opinion that I actually think Java is the best language to start learning, not because it's the best language, but because it's the perfect mix of it is object oriented. You do have a base library to work from, but you have to learn a lot of painful shit, mostly to do with how classes and nested classes and events, and you get just the right mix of I know more than I would with something like C# that'll hide it away from me, and I also don't need to learn everything from first principles like doing assembly or whatever. So you end up with this nice mix of you can tackle some mess in a language, but you also had to learn like events. The fact that you obviously you don't have to do this much now, but learning about the trickling of events makes you think in terms of how events bubble, which gives you that piece of knowledge you wouldn't really need if you didn't learn it the other way around. So I genuinely am happy that outside of first VB, then Java, I think Java was a great language for me to start it with, because by the time I got to C#, it felt like refined Java, and I think I got the best of both for that, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I started in Basic like Jason, and then had to do VB for certain things, but university was all Java all the way through. And then
Because
when
I've seen the
I was
opposite.
going to say, when I came out, my first job was in C, and then C++, and then C#, with loads of bits in between, Haskell, Pascal for robotics, and
probably
functional
JavaScript
programming.
here and there too, because you kind of hit a certain point in your career, you just have to start doing JavaScript, and that's fine. And I never chose to; it just happened as part of my job. But I've seen the opposite happen these days, where because of its ease of use, you learn through JavaScript, which is really cool. You can do something very fast. You can get or PHP or something. People still learn with that as well. But effectively, if you learn through JavaScript using those online coding courses, you can learn the code and make things really quickly. But to transition to object-oriented stuff without your duck typing and all of that, it's a nightmare. And I've watched people. That's the counter to my own rule earlier. Going from JavaScript to learning a object-oriented language, it isn't easy anymore because it's a completely different paradigm from a scripting language to a programming object-oriented language. So I personally think if you can do it, if you have the opportunity, learn a heavier language first and work your way down to something that's more freewheeling.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I wanted to pop this question up. This was one of the ones that got submitted, and I think it's really on topic. Just talking about programming languages and what we learned at the start, and the question was just what programming, not languages, but concepts, should entry-level programmers know when applying to Unity jobs? So entry-level Unity jobs, or I think this really probably applies to not just Unity jobs though, but like any programming job, like unless they're really specific Unity ones you guys can think of as well. So you guys got
The
thoughts on this? I mean, there probably are some Unity specific ones, I guess.
only thing I would say about where you've got Unity in the title there is be careful not to get stuck into the whole Unity version of C# sort of thing. Whenever you look at the tutorials that Unity puts out, they don't go into depth about some of the things you can do in Unity, and they're angled towards basic level of programming, obviously, because they want people to learn. But there's better ways of doing certain things that they don't show in the tutorials. So when you're learning Unity and you're learning to program C# for Unity, also learn C#, because there's stuff in C# that they don't show in any of the Unity tutorials that will help you. And things like the syntactic sugar and certain other aspects. And you get a better version of object-oriented programming if you just go C# directly rather than Unity directly with C#, and you'll get to learn the principle behind that. So that's the only thing I would note on that.
And I'd
Does
even say
iteration
personally,
count?
iteration.
Yeah, just understanding iteration and knowing where to draw lines so you can easily swap things out later. Because one thing that when people hire you for, they want you to make something. And if you're going to make a shitty version, then you're not able to turn it into a better version. That's going to be a problem. So being able to iterate on your code and doing so easily is going to be probably the highest value entry-level thing I can offer.
I would say for me personally, there's only one red flag that is like it immediately knocks someone down off a list for me, which is if they don't know what a constructor is. Because it goes straight to the point that you just said, which is there are people who've done Unity stuff and are quite proficient and learned through Unity, but they have never once learned C#. And as a result, a lot of stuff is guesswork based on the foundations that Unity has given you. If you start everything with a base mono behavior, there's an entire sea of POCOs and structs and systems and static objects and extension methods and stuff that you'll never use because just telling me you don't know what a constructor is tells me you don't know the entire. It's like the tip of the ocean, right? You only know this much of C#, and that takes years to teach. Like there's a difference. There's stuff I don't mind teaching people on the job, but if you don't know C#, that is a lot of stuff to teach people. So as a baseline, constructors, but I would say to go one step further, a lot of people don't realize that a mono behavior isn't just a default thing. It's an implementation of a component architecture sitting on top of C# that you take for granted that Unity has given you. And all of the magic functions and calls and starts and on enables, that's not standard. That is a design architecture that you are taking for granted as you start your projects. And if you can't tell me what system.object is, why it's system.object, why, like one of the first things you'll learn in a normal C# class is things like overriding toString. That tends to be your introduction to the concept of, overrides and virtual functions and whatever. And yet there are people who've used Unity for 5-10 years who don't even know what the toString function is because you don't really use it in Unity. Never mind that you can override it. Never mind how you can override it, or what override means, or what virtual means, or what, and they're not as complicated as it sounds. It's the path you take. And if you don't take the path that comes from C#, you will skip over an entire swath of stuff that you won't know to learn. Like, not only do you not learn it, you won't know to learn it because it won't come up through the normal process. So yeah, I would say learn C#. And my answer to that's always go to Pluralsight or something. Or if you want, start with like 3D Buzz went defunct a while back, and they have the C# 101. It was like a spring code course thing. Go find that. It's now downloadable online. People have torrented it, put it up on the archives. That's a really good introduction. Or get a Pluralsight account. But learn C#, the actual language, not just Unity.
Yeah, and even moving on from that, even the fact that people can just have classes that don't need to be from mono behaviors, like just a basic class, so they don't have the transform, they don't have all the overhead that you've got with this mono behavior sitting on top of a component, sitting on an object. It doesn't have to be a component on an object. It can be a class externally to that. And yeah, people that learn straight off Unity don't know that. And it does fly up red flags.
Yep, I think those are all good points. That and things like understanding or knowing not to make everything public, or that you can make everything not public.
I do want to say that I feel a bit sorry for some people because those things don't feel as much entry level unless you already are far deeper into programming all the advanced things that
Yeah, but I would say they're an entry-level programmer for C# should know all those things.
Yeah, of course.
So if you're going in as an entry-level programmer to Unity, now this is different. If I have a designer apply to a job and I'm hiring a games designer, not a developer,
Yeah,
designer,
I know
then-
you're going to say they just need to know Unity at a monobehavior level. I don't
Yeah.
expect the same thing from them. Exactly.
it's
yeah.
good. It's good. But if I'm hiring a programmer, they have to be C#. They have to know their stuff. They have to know about that class outside of monobehavior. They have to know about the constructors, the deconstructors. They have to know how to manage all that stuff. They know how to destroy it and all the rest. They need to know those things simply because otherwise they're lost, because they come on board and then they start looking at the libraries that we have there and they're like, how can these libraries exist? Like, they don't have anything wrapped on monobehavior. And it's like, yeah, because they're also used in this application that has nothing to do with Unity, because they're just a straightforward C# library that we use in somewhere else.
In fact, here's one that I've now noticed is a red flag, and it's something I've only noticed recently, and I'm not going to call anyone in particular, but I subscribe to 20 or 30 odd Unity YouTubers, people who do Unity YouTube, a lot of them. And I'd say about 40% of them have at some point during live coding streams made the mistake of not understanding the difference between a static and an instanced variable. And they kind of like, oh, I tried to call X and it's not working. And they end up figuring it out through arbitrarily adding a keyword or referencing a parent object and then getting the instance variable from it. But the way they do it is very clear. They don't understand how or why. And these are the kinds of things that are very hard to describe to somebody who hasn't been doing it for years. These aren't just a, whoops, I made a syntax mistake. Sometimes I'll see someone make a mistake and the mistake itself tells me they don't understand what's going on architecturally. And that's more of an underlying red flag issue to me than the actual mistake they made. Some people are like, oh, you're being too harsh on that thing. It's like, no, that's not the thing that happened. The thing that happened tells me they are effectively dice rolling by just they're combining pieces. It's like playing a puzzle game. You can click everything and eventually get the right answer, but there are people who understand what the cause and effects are. And I've noticed understanding statics, instances, private and public, these are things that are like more than fundamental. These are the first things. The literal, if you learn C# as a very starting language, the very first line you'll be written and you'll memorize it. It'll be burned into your retinas from lifetime of reading it. Would be public, static, void, main, string, args, and you'll end up spending your life staring at that for 2 years. And oftentimes, depending on your teacher, they won't tell you what it means because that's not the point. There's too much to unpack. But after a year or so in, you'll be like, okay, now what does public mean? Now what does static mean? Now what does void mean? And you'll suddenly realize how much depth is in that sentence. And so learning the concept of static is a foundational principle. And I'm noticing Unity devs, like, they don't understand that. Like, they will use singletons because it's a pattern, but they won't understand what it means. What is it doing? How is it working? Why is it different than something else? So that one, to me, the whoops, I made a mistake. I tried to access a static function using a variable instance or using a variable instance to access a static. That to me is now like a really red flag because I've started to see it crop up more and more. And I'm talking like 4 to 6 year professional Unity devs. We're not talking beginners here. We're talking this principle is not being understood at a foundational level.
It's
Nail on the
interesting.
head.
I haven't run into that much of that, but I've definitely seen it myself. I think it'd be kind of interesting for us to maybe talk about some interview questions sometime. Maybe get like a list of interview questions, and just kind of discuss them too. Because I think like a lot of it, we're talking about the things that people need to know to get a job, but it'd be kind of interesting to talk about some of the things that people ask in actual interviews. I know I've got like a list of things that I like to ask, or at least the list that I used to like to ask when I would interview people. And I've got lots and lots of examples of good and bad questions that I've been asked. I don't know if you guys have some of those as well. You'd be interested in doing that sometime, but I think it could be a lot of fun. If people are, I guess we'll leave it to people in chat and comments if they're interested in kind of going over some interview questions and talking about that. Let us know in the chat and in the comments, and maybe we'll do that for an upcoming episode. I think it'd be kind of fun.
And just to elaborate on that, when I used to give out tests to people, well, I still do, but for the entry-level programmer, to go back to what I was talking about, I have 2 tests. I have the Unity test and I have the C# test. The C# test has nothing to do with Unity. But if you're a Unity designer or a coder coming in, there's a Unity test that does have some coding in it, but it's very Unity related. So there's there's that as well.
So you give them both tests if they're a programmer then?
If they're a programmer, but if they're a designer, they just get the Unity test, because a lot of the Unity stuff is not so much. There are bits in there like what's wrong with this, but there's a little bit of an extension for the C# people coming in there, because I want to make sure they're not making the obvious mistakes like putting find object in a bloody update statement or things like that. But that sits there for developers as well, for designers as well. But if they don't get some of the questions on the coding, I'm not too bothered about the designers, because I don't expect any designers to do game time code as such. They can do, but they're always evaluated by a programmer.
Nice. You guys got any other thoughts on this one?
I just want to say that if your company doesn't have someone overviewing all the code that gets added by anyone who's not in the lead position, just be very careful about it.
Yeah, because there's something you'll notice is, again, we're talking about interesting red flags. If you come from a designer background, and this is, maybe it's anecdotal, but I've seen this about 10 different times from different designers doing the same thing in different cases, they don't think in terms of loops at all. They fundamentally don't process the way coding works in making components and then iterating and doing things. So you will see a hell of a lot of void thing 1, void thing 2, void thing 3, void thing 4. And there'll be a lot of replication and duplication and whatever, and stuff that could be written in 1 or 2 lines, but you'll find them spending an hour or 2 copying and pasting. Now, that's not a judgment on them as developers, because that's not intuitive. You have to learn to see your code as reusable blocks and do it. It's just one of those things where what I've noticed is a valuable use of my time is to let programmers design, let kind of the artists who are writing their own scripts write their own scripts, and then come along and see what they're doing. And then when they're doing something, try to encapsulate that and create a tool that you can give them then, which does it. And so I'm not just talking about physical buttons. Sometimes I've written a script that says, if you make this, you can call add, and then give it a keyword and an action, a delegate or whatever, and it'll compose a stack of things. And then when you tie it to an animator, you just have to write the keyword. I've just sort of cut the need for them to write if this equals this checks for 100 different things, because it's not how I would do it, but I'm doing it in a way that simplifies their workflow for what they're trying to achieve. So there'll be a lot of that I think comes up. And one other thing too on this topic, with one of the things you should learn, understand the flow of Unity, because we talked already about what you do if you come from Unity going to C# and you're missing all of the statics and all of the whatever. The same is true if you come from C# going to Unity. The 2 things you won't understand is, one, unless you've really learned a component model, you won't understand what it's doing. Like, you have to learn how a component model builds a tree, how it walks the tree, how it gets components, and that'll underline every decision you make with calling get components and all of that. You also need to understand how serialization works, because that's not something that'll make sense to you. You may serialize files, but you may not have done serialization in an environment where Unity is live instantiating your stuff. That is not intuitive to a C# developer. You build a thing, you run it, it builds it in memory, it does stuff. In Unity, it's always there. Instances exist as you edit it, which is a really weird thing to reason about. And then there was one other one. Oh yeah, delta time. When you first start doing C# into GameDev, the concept of time and making your code independent of frame rate is not intuitive at all. You're going to have to learn what delta time is, why it's important, how to apply it, what the update loop is, because there's a fundamental difference between event-driven and loop-driven, and that's going to be a big architectural change. So learn how game loops work, and learn how Unity does its hierarchy of events from awake down to destroy. So learn those things if you come from a C# background into GameDev.
Unity actually has a page that has script execution order that has a really neat diagram that shows everybody exactly.
I've saved that diagram, and it's on my computer in my images library, because it's so frequently useful to look up. Yeah.
Same here, and I'm going to post it for Jason to post out. It's invaluable. Like, if you haven't read that and you're going for a Unity job, or you work as a Unity programmer, read it like immediately after the stream and watching my tutorial. Read this. I've got to plug it. Read that, because the amount
You
of
don't need
times
to know it
people don't
offhand. You just need to have looked at it. You need to understand there's a life cycle of functions and what order they're called in. If someone asks you,
And
is X before Y, you can get it wrong. That's fine. I won't judge you too harshly. I just need you to know there is hierarchies and that you can check it
yeah,
out.
the best thing you can say is I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know this page exists and I will check for 3 seconds.
Yeah, and this is one of the things people miss all the time. Right up at the top, the awake on enable versus start. How awake and on enable are called for each object, and then
So
for the next one, instead of awake on all of them and then object on enable on all.
there is something that isn't covered in this page though, and this is how do these hooks get called across different components, because as soon as you instantiate an object, all the
Script
awakes and all
execution
the
order.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but you don't see that here, and of course it's not going to show you all the scripts in the Unity editor window for it. And there are times where people are going to say, I'm just going to shove all my instantiation code that relies on other components in awake. And what happens is some of them are not ready yet to be used because they awake in an order that you don't expect. And this would be something critical to understand there. Like,
So
this
you
isn't
wait
everything.
for start for it to use any dependencies to generally
Usually.
do.
Yeah.
Set up dependencies in
Yeah.
awake and use them only in start.
Yeah, it doesn't sound intuitive, but I often like mentally will think of the word awake as meaning initialize and then start as meaning use. In other words, initialize all the things so they hook up and get references in awake, and then in start you would use those things. And although you will get into really weird scenarios later on in your career doing this, where you're using on enable and on disable, and you don't realize that awake is only called the first time, it is not called again in subsequent on and offs, and that can get you into weird territory if you've got your order wrong in what you're doing.
Or if
There's
your
there's
objects are
also
disabled.
Yeah, there's also the odd case of objects having to follow each other, and then the update order is going to be different, and that's going to screw you up. Say something moves and then something copies its position, where instead it's something copies the position and then something moves. You're going to see a problem, and that won't be covered here. But you have to understand that there's also the script execution happens per script type and not based on how it's in the hierarchy or etc.
And
And
another
on,
one too is on validate. Is once you start learning how to use on validate, you'll realize it's really powerful and you should be using it with your custom scripts. But what you might make the mistake of doing is putting conditional logic in on validate, which only gets called in the editor and won't get called on your scripts when they're actually built. So you have to make sure whatever logic you're putting in on validate is wrapped, used in on validate, but is also used during some loop or some start function or something to perform the same action as it would have done in the validation.
And
the
I
other thing,
kind of want. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing to point out is also that scripts execute differently on different builds. So what execution order your scripts happen on standalone in the editor are different to what happens in the build. So if you don't use that awake and start properly, things are going to initialize in a different order to what you see. So it might work in your editor, but as soon as you build and run it, it doesn't work because this component is being called way before this component, and that screws script execution order on your components, etc. That gets called differently, and you can force that because there is a setting in Unity that allows you to set script execution order. But in general, splitting your stuff in awake and start, like both Jasons have been saying, is essential to know. If I see somebody that has literally all their scripts in that script execution order thing, I'm asking questions why.
I honestly, I go with I pretend that doesn't exist. The only time I ever use the script execution order tab is when it's an asset that is doing things in order that I can't control, and I have to forcing it initializing before my code. I will never, under any circumstance, write my own code that requires a script execution order assignment, because it starts to get into weird magic territory where you have to assume something outside of your control happens to be in the right order, which is fine in this one project. But if you do what I do regularly, which is export out a Unity package, give it to someone else, you have to say, oh, by the way, after you import this package, go into your script execution, set the order, and sure, like that's nonsense. You don't want to do that. You don't want to rely on some hypothetical order. So I would say for 90% of people here in chat, pretend if you do know about the script execution order tab, pretend it doesn't exist. treat it right and do your orders correctly in your script.
Yep. The only time I think I have things in there are things to do with hacks on something that Unity's doing, and I need to fix it.
So I want to bring this up because if you do need to give someone a package and you have to use the execution order, there is actually an attribute that you can put on your classes that registers them into the execution order with a default priority number, and it's the default execution order attribute.
Thanks, I hate it.
Yeah. And I do want to bring up on serialization, there is a headache that I, as an entry-level programmer on serialization in Unity, I found myself getting into a problem with, which was if you try to serialize and you are editing another object's values, like another mono behavior's values, from your on serialize on validate method, it's going to dirty the scene every single time that it does that. So that is something to watch out for. You are only supposed to edit your own mono behaviors fields in your own on validate.
And in fact, you'll actually get a warning if you do something that results in a send message call being fired, which is basically Unity's internal way of eventing up and down between its own hierarchy tree. If you do something that changes a component, which Unity then by proxy fires off a send message, it will tell you, don't do this. You're not supposed to do this in the editor. So you might need your if application is playing flag or something to ensure that only happens when it's running.
That's also if you overload the timeline and you add your own functionality to the timeline system, it actually calls the scripts. So that if application is playing is useful in there as well.
Nice. Well, before we
scrub
jump
it.
on to another question, I was hoping I could maybe get you guys to share some of that cool tech you were showing off before we got started on the stream, and just show some of these new things and talk a little bit about them. Uri had something. I don't. Were you able to share that one, Uri?
Yeah, sure.
I think that's going to be something really interesting for people.
So right now I am working on an update for Terraria to support the Steam Deck, and it's something that we're trying to do to make the experience a bit better. And I don't have a deck on me because decks are really hard to get, even test units, development units. And Valve has a recommendation for people who are trying to test for the deck without the deck. And what they recommended is a mini PC with a screen that is the same resolution and stuff. So I have it right here. It's tiny, but it works. And it's a monitor that is the exact same resolution and the exact same size as the Steam Deck, and a mini PC and a USB that runs Manjaro, that has Steam, that can run a build of the game. And just building a Linux build and trying to run it and praying that it works and making sure everything runs right.
Nice. So when you do your testing, do you do like a Linux build on something else first and run through all your things and then go out to that device next? Is that the step, or how do you do that?
So most of the things that I am trying to test are UI based, and I can actually simulate most of this with the keyboard and mouse on the PC, which means no switching between platforms, which is way easier. But I have a bat file on my Windows that makes a Linux build, and then Steam has a thing that you can just send a file to the test machine and just use that to test. So I'm letting that run. I didn't do much of this, but because most of my problem was general UI stuff of how to use the trackpads for the Steam Deck. But it's really nice to just be able to shoot it off there and making sure it all works and coming back. Of course, it doesn't give me trackpads to try with, but it does run on Linux, which is important.
Yeah. That's cool. Have they announced a release date for the Steam Deck yet?
They have not beyond, I think, February, I think they said.
Yeah,
probably.
they said February, but that's spurious.
Yeah,
no actual day.
Yeah, just vague. They're sending units and they hope they get there in time, I guess.
Oh, okay.
They seem to have sent more units to reporters than they did to the devs.
It's possible.
To be fair, it's just a build of the game on Linux with trackpads, and the trackpads are programmable to rebind into anything else. So as long as your game works with a gamepad and a keyboard and mouse without doing a lot of context switching, like changing how the glyphs look, hints, and all that, you should be okay.
Yeah.
Also,
it's also got to run on Linux, though, right? You got to be able to compile and not have
they have Proton, which lets you run a Windows build and pray, but yeah, a native build would be better if you can afford it, have the skill and the devs to invest in it.
Cool. So who wants to share something else? I know Jason and Dave both had something cool. Anybody want to wave at?
I just did the rounds and grabbed anything within hand range that is like vaguely interesting. So I'll do a quick fire.
Let's see it all.
So the first thing I had is my loop deck for video editing. That's kind of my new toy. I haven't really played with it much yet. Prior to this, I was using the palette gear, which I really like. It's really good, but there's certain issues I have with it, which is why I wanted to see if this would replace it, because this feels like it'd be better for a one-hand thing, and I could have the other hand on the keyboard and shortcuts. The other one takes up a lot of desk space. It's hard to maneuver around various different things. Then the rest is just the video editing stuff is the only stuff I have nearby. So I have my Parrot teleprompter here, which is just clips on top of my camera, and I can put a smartphone underneath here, and then it projects up, and I can look it right down the barrel of my camera and see a teleprompter, just like a real teleprompter,
just like this, and say all of the words that are on your screen and read them. Right,
it's very, very good. I highly recommend it.
No, they are awesome. I've used the big one. I wanted to get a small one like that, and they were out of stock, and I ordered a big one, and I just really regret it. I really wish I had the little one, because you want to focus and like stare right into the
it also, I'm not gonna lie, it makes your camera look really cool. It looks stupid here, but when you put it on the camera, it gives it this really cool, because it makes the shape of the camera go in and out, and it just it looks like a big professional camera rather than just the dig. Because the problem is, like with the lens on these cameras, they tend to be quite small, and it doesn't look as cool. So this, oddly enough, makes your camera look cooler as like a professional setup. Then I've got
the alternative, Jason, before you move on, is just don't be on camera.
if I had that option, man, if I had that option, trust me, I would take it.
Time to become a VTuber.
Just listening, record it, and then just go.
Then there's a little toy here. If you're doing accent lighting for stuff, you're going to want pocket lights. The Aperture MC lights. These are really good because they're little magnetic things at the back, and you can charge it. So you can snap it. I have a briefcase with a bunch of them in it, and they auto charge. They're really handy because all of the settings are on them. Like you can go in and tweak the saturation, you can tweak the color temperature, all the various stuff you need. It's got this diffuser on it, which is really nice. So if you're doing something like a B-roll shot and you want to have light in scene, you can literally mount one of these on like a little tripod. I have a few of those over there. That's really handy. Then last thing is also video editing, because it all kind of happens to be near me at the moment, is one of these, which is the X-Rite color checkers. And so what these do is they give you your standard color matches. And what you can do, as if you haven't done video color correction before, you just capture a frame of this, you crop to that section, and you've got pure white in frame, which means you can balance your whites to a white level, so all the footage you've covered match the same white, and then you can use the color temperatures here to match for whatever grading you're looking for. So it's a small thing, but it makes your life a lot easier when you end up with a bunch of shots that are mildly off, and your skin color keeps like changing between the different temperatures of the video. So something like this, you literally just need a white piece of paper, but this gives you more in terms of how because you've got the different ones, it draws a grid, and it lets you in the actual Lumetri color panel, you can there's a whole set of like where your skin tone should be naturally sitting on curves, and if you understand color grading, you can kind of having the other colors lets you normalize it to then style it after the fact. So
what if you barely understand it? Is it still usable? Can you get some use out of it if like you have it there and you hit some buttons? Will it auto make you look a little bit better? Or
if you barely understand it, what your best bet to do is go into your camera, learn how to set the setting to something like there's one of the ones which is kind of halfway between log and normal, and then go into OBS, apply a default LUT, buy it from a YouTuber. They usually have packs of 10 or 12 LUTs that look a certain way, and then you've got your abracadabra switch between different styles. That's probably the most straightforward. You wouldn't need something like that if you're just trying to get a look out of your camera.
Fair enough.
And then just last thing, I got this for Christmas. My cousin made that for me. There we go. That's the last thing on my desk. So.
Very cool. Lots of video editing stuff. I'm curious to see how that that new deck works compared to the other one you had was the modular one that snapped together, right?
Yeah, the palette gear. I really
all in
like it,
one.
but it's got some bloody issues with the hardware. So it's got this thing here. It's the core, and then you snap different components together. And according to their online stuff, you're supposed to get about 14 of these modules connected at one time. I can't get more than 3 before the damn thing starts cutting out. So when it works, it's amazing. But the firmware won't update on this, so I've complained to their support for that, and I can't get more than a few of the components to connect. But when they do, it's great. But even then, my point is, you end up with a panel this size that takes up your whole desk. Something like this, that's one-handed, that has lots of shortcuts on it, is sometimes better than moving all of your stuff. Just like if I'm doing a huge session of cutting out A-roll and B-roll, I'll use the palette gear. If I just want something to do quick color grading and stuff, I might just use the loop deck. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm still playing. I haven't figured out what I like to do most yet, so I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, I want to see how that turns
Please
out.
do.
It does look like it's a lot more condensed and just kind of does probably all the things you need, unless you're in a more professional environment where you might need to customize more. Or I'd be curious to see. Yori, there was a question in chat about your batch file in Steam. I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a good one. You want to just take this real quick?
Yeah, so I wanted to say, bat files do have a lot of use regardless of how what year we are in, because it's the simplest script to just run processes on your computer and saving on steps. If I'm going to try and make 9 builds of the game all at once and then making sure they are all removing files I don't want published, and then I want to publish the thing, I can just make a single bat file with like 10 lines of code that will run build, delete these files and publish. And that's that. And there's not going to be anything that does that faster for you. Like an autoclicker isn't going to do that for you. It's just there's nothing that you can just say record and do this faster than a bat file.
And you're using Steam for this, so anybody who's used Steam knows that they basically give you a batch file setup for your deployment, and it makes it actually extremely easy. I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, batch files? Like, that's a little strange. And I was like, oh, I see why. I just literally like double click this or type the command in, and now everything works. And it's super simple to edit. Like, it's definitely the easiest, a lot better than web interfaces and other things. I remember when Oculus opened their store, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Set it up, and I was like, oh, I really miss Steam setup. Like, the batch file thing was weird for a minute, and then it was
Yeah,
awesome.
I was going to say that it is mandatory. Back when you were doing VR development with the Vive, you had to know how to make batch files because everything was using the command line. It was using the Android ADB stuff. If you didn't make batch files, you would be writing like 12 or 15 different individual commands in one after another, which are relatively long with all the flags and settings. So yeah, they're a lifesaver for those kinds of configurations.
They
Yeah,
are
and-
all over my PC.
littered with .bats.
And
Because I use
just
them all
want
the
to
time, and you can actually have Windows schedule to run batch files at certain times of the day and all the rest of it. So I have things copied to data redundancy drives and all the rest during the day using batch files. Why not? Super simple.
And I just want to say it's not just necessarily related to Steam. You can just do anything with them. And one of the most common things is making builds for your things. Because if you have a project with .NET, you can just say ms build in the project folder and bam.
Or example I told Yuri about it before is I've written a command line application in C# which accesses the process list in Windows and kills anything which is a social media pop-up or dialogue or whatever. And I've made a command line app out of it. I've automatically moved it so when I do a build with MS Build, it drops the result into a folder which is connected to my path variables. So the act of making a build adds it to my command line. And then I have batch files which use my own application to do various things. And so what that means is on my Stream Deck, I have a button that will, just before I record any footage, guarantee to kill anything which might do a ping noise over the course of doing some video recording. There's other little things too, like just there's one that does like hides my desktop, hides certain folders because there's NDA client projects and stuff. So I have just buttons that basically say I'm about to record my screen. Here's safe mode effectively before I do that. And there's tons of other stuff, and that's basically just batch files and a little custom command line. And once you realize you can do literally anything with it, right? So you just build little apps, automate the process, and you can completely customize your computer.
And
Yeah,
one
that
more
social media thing resonates so heavily. Like I was doing a recording the other day, 15 minutes in, and Skype pops up from my wife asking me what I want for dinner, and it's like, oh, God damn it. Like, right in the middle of something that I can't actually copy out, sort of thing, because something's moving behind it. It's like, just.
I've got those in videos edited in that I didn't notice, and then like, oh, there's comments, like all the comments are like, remove the Skype sounds. What the hell? It's random stuff like 10 minutes in. People think they're getting messages.
Yeah, well, again, that
Actually,
happens all the time. I watch someone else's video and I go and check my messages and go, oh, it's in the video. And then I always
Yeah.
scrub back and go, was that? Yeah, it was in the video. Just to double
Yeah,
check.
you gotta double check it. Yeah, maybe I should do that intentionally, just so people will rewind and double check more often.
In fact,
Evil.
Jason, do you remember we were doing a hackathon for VR, and it was for Frack, that game we were playing with, and we were
Yeah.
demoing it to a load of people, and it was on the Gear VR. So I was using my phone in there, and then suddenly it's always my wife asking me what I want for dinner, like because she's cooking that night, and she knows I'm so picky. And then she literally is just messaging me, going, "Why aren't you answering? I want to get on with it. Why aren't you answering?" It's like, because I'm demoing and it's stuck on my head. And of course, we're casting this onto a screen, so everybody's just wetting themselves laughing in the audience as I'm trying to get this phone out and turn off Skype.
Dave, did you want to share your little? You're talking about VR
Yeah,
stuff.
sure.
You had some new tech you could
So
share, right?
I kickstarted a new tracker from Tundra Labs, and it's this thing here. So it's a track puck. This is the old one for reference. This is the nice big chunky one from Vive, and then this is the Tundra. So you can see the size difference in there. So yeah, I just got this. I haven't done anything with it yet, so I don't know how good it is. But I've
tell
used
everyone
stuff.
what it does.
Yeah, so when you're building, so I do a lot of hardware stuff alongside the software things. So things like my own guns and stuff that I take into VR and use that have my own mechanics in them, my own patented stuff to have reloading, etc. And I want to track those things in the virtual world. So I can actually attach a puck onto the item, or a puck much smaller. And then basically when this thing moves in the virtual world, the tracking unit in the actual room here will tell where this is and at what orientation, and then basically provide that location in the virtual world in Unity for me. And then I can attach the model to this particular thing or make it go to that location. So if you want to pretend like you're drinking, you pick up a glass in VR, you can have this thing on the bottom of a physical object and actually have that tracked. So, you know, if you want to play baseball, stick this on the end of the baseball unit and swing it around. And therefore, you know where the end of the baseball bat is, or at the bottom of the baseball. Usually the bottom, because at the top it'll be going faster and you have to get the tracking time, etc. But yeah, you stick these on them and suddenly the physical object is now location spaced in the virtual world.
Yep, I want to pull up a quick
And yes,
video.
Alassian Tor just asked, yes, they do work with the standard Steam base stations.
How did I record this video? So in this video, I used those old trackers to track a tennis racket in game. I don't know. It's an old video, so it's not very good. You can see it tracked right there. And then I think I just started tossing the racket around and catching it and stuff. You can actually see it really well, and it tracks perfectly. I assume this new one tracks even better? Or is it about the same?
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's going to be to the point that it's noticeably better, except for some of the stuff, some more advanced option where you're doing very, very fast movements, etc. Supposed it's a little bit better at that, but they're not the sort of thing you want to do unless you've done things before. Because I've seen too many broken screens and broken stuff for it. But the main point is they're about a quarter of the size. So if you think of this big circle and you think of it as a square, then this little square here is about a quarter of the size. It also has all the attachments on it. So it actually has loopholes for a belt module, etc. So you can put these as feet trackers, leg trackers, arm trackers, and stuff like that. So you can just position these all around your body. And next thing you know, you've got a fully tracked human to then build your IK skeleton off and just actually have them in the world.
Although that being said, I think if anybody who's worked with VR long enough knows you can actually cheat a lot, normal IK with just the headset. But if you put one single tracker on your belt buckle, that is more than enough to get you an 85% looking perfectly accurate track. It's amazing how just having a single pivot point for there will cover, because you already know the feet movement from the actual character controller itself. Having a center body gives you all the pivots and tilts, and you can cross-reference against the head. So from some of the early experiments, the difference between something which looks janky and something which looks legitimate is just one belt tracker. It's amazing how much of a difference it makes.
In fact, on the Infinideck, if people have seen that, the movable treadmill, they have a belt buckle thing on that. Well, they did when I first tried it, but it was way, way back. It's amazing how much that does. The feet ones, I've done some stuff for soccer teams and stuff like that, football teams for my English friends. And that, obviously, you want to get much more accurate feet placement and things like hand placement, where you've got wrist, where you're using your hand to do something in the world, your physical hand, like you're holding something, you track the wrist and not the actual hand. And then you can, the old trackers had the USB connections that were just ropey, that you could work that stuff through the USB connection. You could connect up points and like resistance bands to work out bend, so bend bands on how much your finger's bent, and etc. But the USB port on that was ropey as hell, so we started going with an external Bluetooth module to then pass that stuff across for our prototype stuff with auto mechanics, etc. Somebody mentioned the Deca Move.
There you go.
Oh,
You probably want to make it closer and then upside down. Yeah. Okay.
There you go. That's the Deca Move. It's still in the box. I will get it out and do something with it, I promise. The same with the Tobii eye tracker. I have got that. I have played with it. I have done stuff with that I can't show, but I will do a Tobii eye tracker version. All the stuff I have this hardware for is for my own projects, just to note. So I don't know how well they work with other people's VR projects or other people's hardware, because I noticed somebody said they're useless, the Deca Moves. I haven't tried it. It seems to be good with some of the people I know that are working on their own things, that are specifically building stuff for the Deca Move in mind, rather than having it as an additional placement system on something that wasn't built to run with the Deca Move. So just to caveat that. My stuff.
I used to feel really bad with the remember the Magic Leap. I knew people on the team, and I knew people who worked with it all the time, and great people, really talented. But every time I used the damn thing, it was fucking nightmare. I hated it. It was an absolute travesty. Its lighting requirements were asinine, like getting the lighting to be just right where it would work. And I always felt really bad because I kept watching these amazing blog posts of all of this fantastic stuff they're doing. But every time I had to use it myself or a client asked for hand tracking, I would like do my best to dissuade them unless they really, really needed it, because I was like, you don't want this. It's not going to do what you think it will. It's not there yet.
They sent me 3 of them.
Yeah, they used to give them away like candy, right? They used to, like, literally, I used to get, like, I said once that I had one, and then I said, oh, do you have one? I think so, I can't remember. And then they gave me 2, like, at the event I was at. They just handed me 2 more. Yeah, they love giving those away.
Great development community. I've done a couple of things for it that we talked back and forwards with, so they got some insight on that. But yeah, I never used it in a serious project because, as you say, lighting was an issue. It's kind of like the Kinect. We tried taking the Kinect outside once. The sunlight and the Kinect are not best friends.
We had it once in
terrible
one
outside.
Yeah.
No, yeah, we had it once in a client project, which was a airplane, and they were demonstrating their new fleet. And so one of the demo scenes was you sit in the cockpit and actually fly it yourself, and you coast down. And so you had the hand tracking, and you would actually grab the throttle and do stuff and hit dials and stuff. And it was that used that, and it worked. We got it working. It just wasn't. I mean, a bit painful.
I also have a load of LEDs that have just turned up here, but I'll leave that for another day.
I've got
Jason
some too. I wanted to talk to you about those. I've got my living room is a giant mess now with LEDs just everywhere and wires and.
Well, you're coming round on Wednesday. We can chat about it then. But
yeah, I think it'll be fun. We'll show it, and I'll show you my my big mistake that I made in getting the wrong. There's a problem when you order LEDs in the middle of the night. I made a big mistake. I'll tell you all about it later. See the final results, and maybe I'll be able to share it next week or the week after that.
I'll have a project coming up in the next couple of weeks that will show the LED display pixel display that I'm building, and I've got it running on Unity. So Unity renders out and it comes out in the lights on the LEDs. So over the ESP32 on the Wi-Fi.
You know what I want to come up with? I haven't actually spent any time looking for the solution, and yeah, they are 50/50 strips.
Yeah.
In chat. What I wanted to come up with a solution for is actually rendering a camera out to an LED array. So just rendering like the actual game screen directly.
That wouldn't be hard. Like you
I
literally can
don't
get the
think it
pixel
would be
array directly
difficult,
out of
but
the
just getting it like the pixels, the colors, and then getting that out.
Yeah, you could do it via the graphic split stuff.
There's literally a pixel array, and you just go iterate the pixel array. And
well, the normal way that everybody shows doing it is to put it out to a render texture and then pull off the render texture. So you take the main camera, you put it out to a render texture, and that render texture puts out to. Then you just take that, put it over to a texture 2D, and then pull off using the pixels from that, and then do the conversion using Marshall.
that would certainly be a lot faster than opening the actual pixel. Yeah, that is very performant to mess with the pixel array.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is once it goes over to the GPU, you're kind of like, but it's you can blit it, but you have to do some interrupt stuff to get it because Unity doesn't like you doing any post processing or anything like that on it. Gets lost. The way I did some of it, it's because I'm just really quickly doing it. I haven't done the graphic split stuff yet. I literally just put it out to the render texture and then pulled it off. And it's fast enough because I'm doing a 32x32, so there's not exactly a lot coming across to be converted. That seems to be okay at the moment. I get quite a good refresh. And the thing is, your refresh is always going to also come down to the hardware. So ESP32 has a certain refresh rate. And when you're running 32x32, so a 1024 matrix, there's a specific speed time and all the rest that goes across it. So, yeah, you have to do certain things on the hardware. So even if you're super quick on your Unity, you might not be so quick on your hardware. And then it becomes a cost versus performance basis on the drivers you run with the LEDs. It's a whole subject and conversation.
The other thing too that's quite interesting is once you do use the render texture, you can do a whole lot of really fun image processing on that before you then spit it out. And so something as simple as downsampling all the way up to edge detection and then getting some interesting like line tracings and all sorts. So you can do a lot of really fun stuff once you manipulate the pixels.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
And you can also control the rate at which you render in Unity to save on performance if you don't need it because the hardware can support it. I actually have a funny story. Yeah, I actually have a funny story about that with one of the keyboards for Terraria, which couldn't handle the rate at which we were updating the colors for the keyboard. So it ended up hardware throttling us, and we ended up in a frozen state. And it took a month to just say, okay, screw it, we're throttling the rate at which we're giving it info. Just that one piece of hardware. Just don't call the methods, even though we're sending them.
Absolutely. And here's another tip for your Unity. If you're planning on doing one of these pixel display projects, set your resolution to the pixel display. So I see a lot of people that do these things. They do something like a 19:6, whatever, big widescreen display, and then cut that up and move that down, and then they're pumping it out as a 32x32 or 64x64. And they're doing all this stuff to bring all the pixels down, and then they're doing a process on that. And what they do is they lose colors, or they're mixing colors, or their matrix that they're passing over screws up all the edge detection and the rest of it. When they want to go for a 64, if you know that that's the only thing you're going to go out to, literally set your screen size to 64, 64, 32, 32, and then you've got the pixels. You don't have to do any cutting. You don't have to put over a matrix over your pixels that you've got to get your edges and all the rest nice and neat. You're pumping out what you show, and then just make your thing work to that resolution. It makes it.
Then you can't do a really nice like UI with custom sliders and a fun little front end side of it.
It's so fun to try and do things at a 32 level. Like the other day, I was literally messing with text. So you can use a canvas, you can use a UI, but you have to set it to the scope of the camera to be able to do it, not just the overall. Otherwise, it won't render out into the render texture. Note to self. I'll do all this in a video to show how a lot of this stuff works. Where was I going?
You're saying to set the resolution. Now,
yeah.
On that, so one of the things I was thinking, and I think this might work, is I want to do like super ultra wide, like it's 512 times 50, but it's only 16 pixels high. It's going to be an interesting resolution, right? Like 16 by 30,000 or whatever.
It's all good. You're gonna have so many issues powering that. You could have a lot of fun trying to work that out. But yeah, I'll put up a video, and I'm sure I know Jason's putting up videos now that show how to do all this stuff. And text. That's what I was talking about. I'm trying to remember what I was talking about. So pumping out text, don't use the usual text, use Text Mesh Pro.
Sign distance fields for the win. Yeah.
And then the other thing to do is when you're using Text Mesh Pro, you can actually set the resolution that your text goes out to and preview it before it makes the text asset. So get a nice pixel looking font.
There's one in Text Mesh Pro in the examples pack.
Yeah, and then just literally cut it down to a lower resolution, and then when you pump it out, it actually looks good. It doesn't look like anti-aliasing and a weird matrix over the pixel display has gone mental. And
that's one of those things
that's been thrown up.
Like, it's one of those things people do not understand. If you're ever looking for a fun rabbit hole, learn how to make your own font. You don't have to actually go and make one, but go down the rabbit hole of learning how there's different parts of a font, how they scale differently, how you deal with the fact that you have to keep the lines per pixel resolutions, how you manage different DPI screens, how different fonts have to be split up based on, like, there is so much. And there's a reason why, again, for someone who's not done it, SDF at the end of all the Text Mesh Pro stuff, it isn't a random acronym. It's a specific calculation for how you can scale things using sign distance fields. But it's like, oh my God, fonts are just one of those things that it'll once you learn how much work goes into getting crisp text, it is a nightmare.
Especially in pixel art.
Well, pixel art and VR, the two extremes.
Yeah.
Like, you've got pixel art, which really, you've got to get it right, otherwise it looks odd as hell because the bits.
Yeah, you can't make use of sign distance fields as much because you're going to try and get this crispy, exactly right rendering, and you have a very tiny thing. So even if you try to make a circle around like 1 pixel, it's not, you don't want all the 9, you just want the 4. So you ended up with a cardinal.
And then you're dealing with, like, imagine choosing the wrong font and trying to do serifs on a pixeled font. How? Literally how? Yeah, it gets crazy.
And then you've got the other extreme you're doing in VR, and the anti-aliasing is going to hurt your head when you're trying to read any text that's just on standard text, not using Text Mesh Pro. And you haven't fiddled with it. Like, you've got to get in there and tweak it to the font that you like.
So have you guys read the question that I popped up on chat a little while ago about this lean design, build, measure, learn, repeat approach to developing games? Somebody was curious about our, I guess, just general thoughts on that process for MVPs for games, or I guess minimum viable games, to come up with something that's testable and I guess try to come up with an actual game. Is this something that you guys have followed, a process that you guys have used before?
I don't use that actual. Oh, sorry, you're right. Go on, jump in.
Yeah, I just want to say no, and I think the way that I think there is a problem with this approach specifically because of the word prototype and then measure, because with a prototype you usually try to focus on the unknown and just figure out if something that you don't know about will work as you expect it to, something that you can follow on later to become a full product. And measuring and learning from a project usually implies that you it's a bit harder to explain. When you make it work, you don't necessarily always come with a measurement for it. How do I explain this better?
This is a
David,
tough one for me.
take it from here, and
not one that I've done.
I'll come back to it. Yeah.
So you got things like, I mean, I'll go on. Story, you jump in. I'm reading something.
I was just going to say I had to do a quick checkup because it's been a while. There's so many of these, and I've gone down the project management route so many times I forget all the acronyms, and so I got a bit of a flashback. The key word there is lean, which led me to believe this is the lean startup. Is Eric Ries, that particular philosophy. That's the one, by the way, Jason Weimann, that Chris uses. That's his go-to solution for that. And the philosophy of that book and the general idea is that you, in this day and age, there's this is not supposed to be on a small project basis. This is a corporate structure. How do you process project development, not a project management? And the general idea is that does your company try to hide its secrets, build a big prototype, and release with a bang? Or do you fail fast, fail early, release, iterate, cycle, get feedback? And the argument here is that the current, or at least was current as of a few years ago, philosophy in Silicon Valley was everyone's out to steal everyone's ideas, and there's a lot of like people rushing to market, and your best bet is to build a product that outpaces your competitors. And so people were sequestered away, would do 5 or 6 product SKUs, do internal testing, and then release the one that works, and then scale and iterate. But what this was saying is that it's provable now with the last X number of years of products and projects that releasing a buggy product has now become part of culture in the way that like Steam Greenlight has kind of allowed for people to accept the fact that products don't have to be perfect on launch. And so what you can do is you can release a project and actively acknowledge it's not ready, but iterate fast. And the benefits you get from that are people will use it in ways, because this will always happen, no matter what you make, people will use it in ways you don't expect, and you'll get a much faster feedback as to how to pivot your project than you ever will waiting, releasing, getting feedback, reevaluating, choosing new features, building new features, because people will break it immediately and start using it in different ways. And if you want a classic example, take a look at Fortnite, right? Battle Royale was not their original purview. It's where they pivoted to once they understood. And if they released the game faster in iterative cycles, the argument might be they would have got there first. They would have got there faster if their product was out quicker. I don't know if I agree with that in games, because the problem with games is it's about first impression. And there's a lot of games out there that will fail the day they launch because they come out at the wrong time. The classic example being Overwatch versus, I can't even remember its name, that other game, the other hero game that was quite big from a big studio that had a lot of I can't remember the name of it, but it was just as good on the face of it. Battleborn, thank you. Yeah, it looks good. It's a great looking game. It had no reason to fail other than it came out against a bigger titan at the wrong time. And that wasn't coming out earlier wouldn't have made that better. Other games too have come out and failed early. So I think just be careful. Philosophies like this, if you read a project management book, they're not about you making your game. They're traditionally about what is your business structure? Do you try to iterate faster, or do you effectively build a project and release it in small cycles? I would say the prototyping portion, go for it. You actually do want, if you've got friends and family in a small group, build a Discord, make builds regularly, have your community play it very, very quickly. If you spend 1 month and do 12 iterations, you'll learn more information about whether you're on the right track there than doing a release every month. So in that case, it's good. But at a product release cycle, releasing to something like Steam, you want to get that right. You want to make sure that by the time you're ready to go, you're up against every other game that got released that day, that week, that month, and you don't want to be playing the, oh, well, it's half done, we'll get there. Some games can get away with it if you've got a community pre-built off platform in something like Discord. But if you're launching to Steam and you don't have the goodwill of a large audience, you'll screw yourself by releasing a half-finished game. You'll get a whole pile of bad reviews, and your game will tank, and no one will ever look at it again. So it's useful, but just be careful.
I did get to think about it more, and the thing I wanted to say about prototyping versus measuring things is that once you start measuring a prototype and you want to keep iterating on it, it stops being a prototype, because what you wanted to prove is not necessarily about how people feel about it. And even though you can measure feelings, as soon as you start measuring them and acting towards them, you're not making the prototype prove the unknown, you're making it appeal to people, which it's becoming a full-scale product at that point.
And Dave, did you have anything on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we've used lean startup quite a lot in companies, enterprise companies, or business to business companies that I've worked with and built on. And the lean startup guide is great for some of that, because I have a direct relationship with the person I'm giving the product to, and they know it's beta, and I can talk to them every day, and we can go back and forth on things, and they feel great because they're getting the new features and I'm building around them and the other customers close to them. But with video games, I agree with Story. Like, putting something out that is just buggy as hell, which has become a sort of a norm, is just irritating the hell out of me. But I mean, yeah, you've got prototyping, you've got your grey box stages, you've got your art slice, your vertical slice, you've got your gameplay slice, and all the rest of it for closed audiences to make sure your game works well, and also to make sure you're on the right track of what you're going to do. It's a bit different to pivot in video games than it is to pivot in enterprise level products.
So I guess just to follow up, this question also kind of tied into it about project management stuff, and just asking what tools or what process and tools you guys use for project management. So they listed a couple here: Hack and Plan, Codex, and others. But I'm just kind of curious, like, what do you guys all use now? I mean, I've talked to you guys about this a couple times in the past, but I'm curious, like, what's everybody's like go-to now? You're working on a new project. Maybe it's a small project with a couple people, 2, 3 people, friends or whatever. What's your like go-to project management plan or software or just workflow for that? Do you just make a Google Doc and a Google Sheet? Do you use one of these tools or Trello or something else, or you go like full in Jira board? What's the situation? Who wants to take it? Who's got the
I guess
craziest?
I'll go.
I can start with some basic software. So I use Trello when it's a small project. I use a full-on Jira board when it's a big project. Team size.
Okay.
I
Where
guess-
do you call that? I guess the small to big cutoff. Sorry.
That's variable. I look at the this not seniority as such, but the experience that the team has and how much handholding they're going to need to have, and also what the product is we're putting out, and also if it's just a side product or it's a professional level product that needs accountability in the long term and budgets, etc., that have to be monitored all the way through.
I have a lot of software I use at various different stages, and so it's going to be a bit of a slog here. I will say though, before I give the questions of the answers to the software I use, I will say, don't look at the new shiny toys. That's a problem that I have. I'm very bad at. It's one thing for life advice, but when it comes to project management, the best advice you'll ever hear about project management is it's the process, not the tools. If your process doesn't work on a piece of paper and a pen, it's not a process. Like, all the tools do is simplify the process, make it easier to catch up on it, check it, share it, make notes, make it easier to find references and images. But if your actual workflow of like something needs to be done and I do the thing, if you can't go from start to finish on paper, no tool will make it work. All the tool will do is hide it and make it more fun, but it won't make you get work done. So learn to do it on pen and paper first. And my usual suggestion is learn a basic agile approach using post-it notes. If you do that first, the process can then be put into any tool. The tools make it easier, but don't assume you'll pick up the right tool and it'll teach you how to build a project. You need to know how to build a project, then you use the right tools for the job. As for the tools in particular, I used to put all of my stuff in something like Millinode. Now I still use Millinode, but I've changed how I use it. Now I use Millinode as a proof of concept board. I will use it to capture just the initial reference images of games and things I like. I'll write some notes. I'll share it with the 5 or 6 people who are relevant to the project so we can all collab on that portion. And then as soon as I have a rough idea of what I'm doing, I use Eagle as my own local image library, and I bring in all my image references in there. I tag the images by the project and by, does this image have a UI element I like, or does this image have is it a good example of a block out or a certain type of geometry or whatever? So Eagle is where I have all the image references. Then for my management of the tasks, I use something called the Amazing Marvin, or just Marvin. It's a to-do list app. Any to-do list app will work. You can use Todoist, you can use whatever. I like that one because the way it works is very plug-in oriented and you can customize it. And what I'm doing is I have a hierarchy of projects. So I make a project called client name. Underneath that, I have each project in it. Underneath that, they actually use project as the term. So there's a project with nested sub-projects. And so I can have a project per thing. And then when I do a sub-sprint, I can make a project for the sprint, and I can make to-do list tasks for each of those. And so at the start of a week, I could say, this project for this client under this tree has this week, and then this week has these tasks. And then underneath that, I make a project for today, and then that project is the things I'm doing. And so I can just go tick, 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 close it off, next one. And it keeps everything in this nice hierarchy, so I have a good bird's eye view. And you can then tag those, and I can then go to I can also put like deadlines and dates. So I can go to a different view that shows me all of must be dones, all of the due dates across all of my clients or all of my projects. But it also means I can drill down per client or per project. So it works for my workflow. But At the end of the day, it's a to-do list. It's just a fancy to-do list the way I like using to-do lists. I used to use Trello and other boards for managing it in an agile approach. I still like that, but I found I can get 90% of the same from a to-do list if I do it right. And I felt like I still think if it's a physical project, like a personal project for my life, I will stick it physically on my wall with to-do lists. If it's client projects, I need to be able to share and reference them and whatever, and so it's easier in the app. So yeah, I still prefer the Trello style, but it's a lot more performative in a good way, but not for client projects. So that's tasks. I don't use Trello and stuff anymore for that. And then for managing my knowledge base, I used to use the likes of Jira or Confluence or whatever else. I don't anymore because I find they're very heavy. And unless you're working with somebody for a year or more and you need an actual knowledge base, it's a lot of work. A lot of people don't know how to use it. It gets very messy. I've learned that most people are not used to having a knowledge base. There's no point in me saying, "Hey, let's share everybody on this shared knowledge base of wiki articles." Of no one will use it. It'll be you and one other person, and it'll become a toy, and you'll occasionally play with it. No one will use it. But if you actually want to engage with it, you need to use it yourself. And so I make my own knowledge base, and I use Obsidian for that. And Obsidian is just a folder full of Markdown files, and it lets me again mark it as a client, put the client projects in. For each client project, I make a card for each person. I put that person's Slack and other contact information in it. I make a card for each time we have a meeting or call. I put my bullet point notes per meeting or call we have that reference the stuff. I have my personal to-do list. I have the feature list and goals for the clients for the project. And so I can always cross-reference if someone mentions something. I can do a search in my knowledge base, find out the day it was mentioned, what note I took about it, who talked about it. I can then go find out links and whatever. Anytime someone gives me a PDF or something, I throw it in there as well. And then I have a good backlog of conversations and what I'm working with. Yeah, there's other tools. Someone mentions Notion. Notion is just as good. You can use whatever tool you like. Again, doesn't matter the tool. Just it's good to have a knowledge base of stuff around the project. And you'll find later you'll be in a weird situation where you'll have to like email somebody about something, and you'll be, shit, I don't know what's their email address again, or how do I find it? If the day you're introduced on the project, you put everyone's crap in one file in a little thing called that person, the company they work for, who they answer to, what their job title technically is, a fucking image of them if you forget what they look like, because that can happen when you're working with a lot of different people. It's just having that there is just a good, I can see who it is and I can see what project I'm on. So knowledge base. So I guess to sum it all up, I use Milanote when I'm sort of playing around and I'm back and forthing with people to figure it out. Once it goes into my camp and I'm suddenly in charge of it myself and it's not about the public stuff, because clients will often have their own public stuff. I'll use their tools, but like manage my own tools. I like to know my own little thing. And for my own stuff, I use Marvin for getting work done, Obsidian for keeping track of information, and then Eagle as a giant database of images and references and art. So they're my most used tools. There's other stuff for getting work done, but I won't talk about that just yet. These are just the tools for managing it effectively.
I'm not
And this is why
surprised you
Jason
got a
looks
big
superhuman.
What about you, Yori?
So in Relogic, we have gone through numerous tools, but we've settled on Jira for a good amount of time with Terraria. And going forward, we are trying to use Backlog, which is a Jira equivalent that's better suited for our needs. It's lower scale and it's easier to work with. There were a lot of things that people were uncomfortable with in Jira because high-end, lots of small knobs to touch and a lot of scary things to do. And Backlog simplifies that for most of the team, and it lets us work with the QA testers and the beta testers all within all together with a relatively cheaper plan, because Jira used to be, I think, per person, and Backlog, I think, has a cheaper model for it. I'm not involved in these things. I just recall small details about that. We have tried using Git Kraken boards, which are essentially Trello, but also linked to your GitHub. And whenever you touch any ticket, it's also on your GitHub issues, which has its uses. We tag everything and we make sure it lives on.
This is the backlog one, right? Is this the one that you're trying out? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. But I haven't seen this one before, so it'd be interesting to check out. And how do you like the Git Kraken one?
So GitKraken, I kind of liked it, but I have to say they announced they are going to sunset it at the end of 2022, I think. So that went well.
It's all these licenses, man. They're such a killer. There's so many tools I've picked up. Like, there is an alternate universe where they let me pay outright. By the way, it's why I use Marvin, because it's a one-time fee and I own it for the rest of my life. There's a load of tools I would be using. I would be using GitKraken if I didn't dislike their pricing model. I would be using that other one. I can't remember the name of either. It was before I used Obsidian. There was that one I was using a while back, and it was a web kind of based version of it. But again, their pricing model was such that I couldn't even share other people read-only versions of my files because I had to add them to my team. It's like, I can't use your fucking software if you won't let me use it to do my job. So a lot of these tools, they end up keep trying to do team-based pricing structures, and it's like, what about contractors? A lot of us don't work that way, so we can't use the tool.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, it's where the money comes in, though. So,
and this is how
for
Jason got me to use Marvin.
I've mostly been using Milanote lately, although I've been trying to get into Obsidian. I just feel like I need to hop on a call with you sometime, Jason, to spend 10 minutes like trying to add my day, like with you watching and telling me all the things I'm doing wrong, get that process down, and then it'll work. Because I found a couple times I'm like, if I'd done what Jason said and put some stuff in Obsidian, I would know the answer to this question that I'm trying to find. It's been like twice now, and I was like, all right. Both times I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. So today I'm going to put stuff in. And then I get started and they're like, I'm not sure how to do a lot of these things. And now I'm getting distracted trying to figure this out and not do the actual things I need to do. So I got to ping you out.
I've said before too. Yeah, I've said before too that actually, because we did that, didn't we? I went on and I showed you all the stuff, didn't I? Right? Yeah, we literally did that. Like, this is really interesting. I love tools. I love learning new stuff and trying them out. And it's funny. I've done my research into using tools, like not a tool in particular. The concept of onboarding a new tool in your life is a project in and of itself. And if you think about it, how many things have you tried to onboard and like start using that doesn't work? Because there's a strategy to onboarding new tools. People don't think about it that way, that you have to learn how to use a new tool. And the short answer is friction. If you have something that doesn't fit into your life and it feels like you have to take a tangent off the way you normally do things to start using it, you won't use it because you'll start seeing it not as an addition or a help, but as some sort of conflict or something that is causing you issue. So you need to onboard something in such a way that it takes over something in your life practically to save time. And there's tricks you can do to do that. One is obviously learning the shortcuts, but the main one is lower the friction of use. Find ways to do things that make it easy for you to start. For example, my favorite bookmarking tool is called Toby Tabs, and it's a replacement for the new tab page in Chrome. And now bookmarking new websites is instant. If I'm on a page and I'm like, oh, I'll need to remember this at some stage, I press the new tab button, I drag the tab in that I'm currently on, and I forget about it. And then I don't need to remember it and organize it or structure it. It's there in a place stored now. It's not stored neatly, but it's stored. And then when the time comes that I have time later in my day or week, I will sit down, open Obsidian, and I will go through what I've dragged into Toby and start giving it pride of place in Obsidian. And so the trick is to not try to sit there and go, oh, I'm going to have to open up that tool and type stuff in and do some stuff because you won't use it. So you need to find out what your workflow is. And they talk about this in the Getting Things Done book, is that there's different phases. The capture phase is not the same thing as usage and organization. And too many people try to just roll it all into one, where they mentally block themselves because they try to capture and organize all at once. They hate the idea. It feels like the tool's a chore because they're not using the tool correctly. You need to block time for capture and then block time separately for working through and organizing it. So that's one, that like it's a whole big thing. You have to learn how to use the tools. And then two, learning how to use them efficiently or correctly is a whole different skill. And I'm only learning this myself now. There's a concept called PKM, or personal knowledge management. And it's an entire, like the way we go in depth on programming, there are people who do this on the concept of acquiring information. You can find people who've written books and blogs and articles and posts and YouTube channels where all they do is, how do you take all of the crap you've read, all of the books, all of the YouTube channels, and how do you glean insights from them and be able to remember those insights later, because it's not easy. It's not an intuitive thing to be able to take stuff. If you heard one valuable line from in 4 hours of YouTube, how do you remember that, keep it, and reference it later when it comes up again in conversation? You need to learn how to do that. And so building a knowledge management base is hard to do. There's different strategies, just like anything else. MOCs is the one I currently use. It's a whole different conversation as well. But you have to learn how to do that as well. So each of these processes have research processes to learn how to use the processes. And so it's worth taking it slow and then starting at the how do I even capture information before you get to the what tool do I use and how do I use it? Because if you don't know your own process, how can you pick the right tool for your process? It's a whole journey, is all I'm saying.
I do want to bring up one small tip there, though. Check the official tutorials and documentation. Can give that enough credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to go on to something that Yorai shared earlier and pop it up on screen. But before I do, I just wanted to ask everybody to hit the like button, subscribe, and just share the stream if you guys are interested in this stuff. I want to cover a couple new tech things that have come out, and then maybe we'll hit a couple more questions. And then finally, we'll finish up by giving out another writer license. So, Yorai, I believe you were the one that shared this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't seen this, and once I did, I saw it. I thought it was really, really cool, and I was just excited that you'd shared it. And tell everybody what it is.
So Unity released a new terrain sample pack at the end of the year. And for people who want to say that Unreal looks way better, well, here's something you can try with Unity, and it's available for everyone, and perfect to get started with. It's good to see that they're updating their sample packages, because that's something that they've been lacking with for a few years now. And
Yeah,
I mean,
looks
look at
really
it.
nice.
Yeah, and it's compatible with both render pipelines, so there's that. Like, doesn't matter if you're using URP, HDRP, you can get something that looks nice and usable and way better than your standard plane for trying out mechanics.
Nice. Yeah, it looks really cool. I think I'm gonna grab it and try it out myself. I think sometime this week go through and see, because I think it looks nice. And usually what I end up doing is going into Pro Builder and just dropping something out when I want to test mechanics. But if I can have a nice looking scene where I don't have to go grab some third party asset and then worry about the updates on it and the random stuff in there, I think that'll be a fun little playground to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you should link
somebody
that in chat
asked,
so I can grab a copy too.
one moment.
Very cool.
Yeah. If you can link it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put the link. The link is already in the description for everybody if they want to go
Oh.
check it out. But I'll drop it in chat as well, and go check out that pack and pull it into your projects. I think it's pretty cool. There was also you mentioned C#8 coming to Unity. I thought maybe that would be another interesting thing to just quickly discuss and talk about. Did you guys give that much thought? Have you watched Charles's video on C#8 already?
I mean, I've looked into it because there's one feature I really, really, really wanted up until now, though.
Which feature is that?
Default interface implementations. It's
I
like
I have opinions on this, so jump in.
Yeah.
Are you as
figured.
yeah? I was gonna say, are you the same as me, where I'm just like, I don't think we need this. I really don't. I don't see.
Yeah,
that.
so
I almost
I
don't
know.
like it. But go on.
I know. I don't like it either. Yeah.
I'm with you, but I really, really, really wanted it, because when you try to make an interface and you're like, oh, I'm gonna need that one method, but I already have 5 things that implement it, and the context has changed right now. It's like, if you know that the 4 out of 5 things are not going to use a unique implementation, it's usually it feels better when you can just have the base place. Like, it's basically giving you free abstract class pieces. You can literally make up a class now out of abstract implementations, and just it has these interfaces. It's all default implementations, but it will work.
There's only one feature I've ever wanted. Like I'm someone who I was using 3.5. It was fine. I loved it. Then they added the whole the string interpolation syntax, and I'm like, okay, that's a game changer. The amount of times I need that, I was delighted. And then the tasks and using The task parallel library was the one thing I wanted in Unity. And the day they added support for C#4, I was like, I'm happy forever. Beyond this point, everything else is nice, but that was the one version that I fundamentally needed to work with what I wanted. And all these other new things are fine. I like to wait until I see if they become good canonically to use. I tend not to jump on them initially, and I also, what's worse is if I keep an eye on the upcoming features, I'll be bummed out that I don't have them, and so I don't even look at them until they make it into the tools that I'm using. The one exception is the one feature I've always wanted, and they still haven't added, and it drives me fucking insane, is custom indexers, like on lists where you use square bracket syntax to reference a thing. It's great. I use it all of the time for custom collections. But you can't declare them in an interface because they're considered an interface to a data structure, which means a data structure is a POCO object and not an interface abstraction, and so they don't let you define them. I presume the idea being that an object should have indexers to its data, and if you put in an interface, you'd have multiple interfaces and have to deal with that. But I like them so much, I want to create custom types like an inventory or an equipment collection or a bag, and I want to be able to reference it with square bracket index and not have to keep writing get item or get index or get element. But they won't put it. They won't put that one feature in interfaces, which is the only one I've ever wanted in 4 versions of C#. Very annoyed.
But go back to this default implementation of the interface. I don't know. I've got mixed feelings. Maybe I'm just being an old man again, but I kind of was like, now I'm putting the stuff into my interface, and
to the contract,
somebody's going to forget to, like, if I've got a load of weapons and stuff like that, and then I go and add an extra default, I just add something to the interface and I don't go and implement it across all my weapons, and I just hope the default one does the thing I want it to do, but without checking all the items, do it. I don't know.
There are some cases, like the case that comes to mind is a very good example, is if you have some script like a stat system, and the stat system has mins and max values and all this stuff, you might have a percent field, and the percent field might be a calculated field based on the others. And rather than having everybody write some replicated calculation for calculating percent or clamping values or something, putting an interface means presumptively, unless you want it to be a stored value and not a calculated field, you get for free the percent calculation across all subsequent implementations. That makes sense to me, but even still, like, you can just make a base class. Like, I don't really see a lot of utility in methods inside of interfaces.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole C++ and C# sort of interfaces being introduced to C# over C++ and one deriving from one class instead of deriving from many. And
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, you just said that if you're going to make a base class, you're restricting yourself to not being able to use multiple pieces of things easily. And if any of these things change, you now have to go and change all the base classes or et cetera, et cetera. So having a default implementation is good, because if you need to change a contract, you don't have to retroactively change everything that uses that contract. Because if you can deduce what you're going to do, it has its uses.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I worry that somebody won't go and check all the class. I think that's the thing. I worry that somebody won't check that all the things that implement that interface, and they'll put some sort of default thing in there they haven't checked, and now that interface is very different for one of the classes that uses it. Basically, that's probably my worry about it. People just being a little bit lazy and not doing their homework, and it's easy to abuse. I think that's it.
But like extension methods, right? I'm always worried when I start using them, because it's almost like I've given carte blanche to the team to start using them. I'm like, no, I have a set of internal rules with which I decide whether or not something's an extension method. I use specific namespaces to make sure it doesn't muddy the contract with other stuff. Do not just start randomly adding extension methods for everything. That's not what it. So I'm worried that it might fall into that category.
So going through some of the other bits, and infallible code. Yeah, I saw somebody mention that. Yeah, it was a good video on some of the things.
Bring him
here. In fact, some of the things on the arrays with carrots and
the range. Yeah, the range system is nice. Like it's cleaner and whatever.
It's easier to write some of that stuff, because the amount of times I'm looking for something off the end, or I'm looking at the end or whatever, and you have to write on the length -1 and all the rest of it, and you don't have to do that now because you use the caret. I quite like that. Yeah.
I will say so. So one of the mentioned things is the switched expressions. So I'm kind of
with the lambdas.
I'm really cautiously. I'm trying to avoid going on too big of a rant here on this, but before we talk about specific issues, I want to just highlight one thing overall. A lot of features in languages stem from some problem, and they extend and become simplified ways of doing things. And your opinions on whether you should use them should come from your understanding of what the problems are and what they solve, not if they look nice. And a lot of things I see, like we're discussing the philosophy of interfaces here, but it's fair to say that interfaces are not an arbitrary thing. If you go down the rabbit hole, interfaces are a solution to the deadly diamond of death problem with multiple inheritance. They serve a purpose. There's a reason why they don't exist at the moment. There's a reason why people are trying to make it exist. There's a reason why languages like Smalltalk did have it. And there's reasons why people who are older devs wanted those features and will still want them now, and why this is a good halfway house. I don't like it because it's not how I grew up programming, but the point is, it's not an arbitrary fun decision for it makes the code look nicer or goes here. And the same thing goes for these case switch statements. So switch expressions is a particular syntax to solve a data structure issue. And the data structure issue is specifically switch cases in terms of, so I don't have, okay. There is polymorphic dispatch and there is case statements. Case statements are anytime you're switching on a if this, do this, otherwise do this. And I don't want to go down a whole explanation about why they're diametrically opposed architecturally and why one solves certain problems and one solves the other. But I will say a switch statement is a particular architecture that solves a particular fan out problem in a particular way when the entities are growing at a different rate than the operations. There is a almost calculus you can do to decide whether this should be a switch statement or whether you should be using objects. And as a result, each of these tools are making it easier and easier to just make fun, quick switch statements. And I don't like that because I don't think enough people understand why you should or shouldn't pick a switch statement versus something polymorphic. And the more we keep like making it really fun to do these little conditionals and switches and all these different things, I'm going to see a lot more of them, where people are just going to start putting more and more typecasting switch statements of all sorts of complicated stuff because they're never going to think about the architecture they're writing. They'll just see all of these tools and go, well, they wouldn't be there if they weren't there for a reason, and they're not going to understand the why. And I'm going to end up having to debug a lot of bad future code. So I think they're fun tools, but it's like giving a toddler a Ferrari, and I'm worried, is all I'll say.
You guys are so worrisome.
Yeah.
You know, here's something you probably won't have something to argue about. Using
You're muted,
declarations.
Dave.
Oh.
Or silent.
So yeah, using declarations. Got anything against that?
Which one of these again? I know
that one where you don't have to say using and then open parentheses and then put things there. You can just say using at the start and close it off as a statement.
Sure, that's fine because they're scoped, right? Again, if something's scoped, I don't mind as much because they're like you can do limited damage with scoped things, basically.
Yeah, I mean, although there is the argument that you might want to close a scope early so you can do something else with with what you've made, and
I'm kind of like, this feels a little bit lazy. The whole I'm removing the brackets from the using and all that. I wasn't too keen.
Especially when you can already do that. Like a lot of people don't realize you can just do a using statement that says using var blank whatever. That's one line anyway. Like you don't actually need it. It's same with like one thing. Like I will say, fundamentally changed the way I did use it. So if we're going back to features, when they added inline variables in out statements, I was really against it because I didn't like. I'm very much of the fan of the command query separation. A method should do one thing only, either a query or execute a command. And I never used out statements because they're confusing. But once they added inline variable declarations, suddenly you could do a lot of really nice stuff like try gets, return a bool, store a variable, check the type. So that fundamentally changed how I program. And so I'm willing to accept some of these things may become part of my workflow, but I'm allowed to be curmudgeonly about it until that happens.
Yeah, and in general, the way all the code goes with C# 8 to 10 is just that they keep cutting out the things you need to do. You don't even have to make a main method in C# 10 anymore. I'm
okay with somebody calling me an old coder as well, because I get that a lot because I don't use all the latest syntax sugar and all the rest.
But I do, though. I use all of it. That's the problem. I'm one of those people who, like, when it becomes part of the system I use, I will use all of it. It's just I have to let it get to the point that it's not, like, beta-ish for some other languages, you know?
I had another person have a go at me for writing M underscore the other day.
Yeah, you're still. That's wrong.
I
Like,
get that
I would like.
consistently
I would happily rant for an hour about why that's not just I don't like it. I think it's fundamentally the wrong way to do it. But that's a whole different conversation.
Wait, was the person
Good rant.
Jason?
No, it was somebody else. They want
Would have been
to
an essay in
remove.
person.
They want to remove everything from the front of it. So no underscore, no M underscore. Just
Well, see, that's where I think that's wrong. It's an underscore. It has to be an underscore.
I know, because you use underscores.
Yeah, I agree with Jason. He's right, and everybody else is wrong.
I just want to point out to the people who aren't using the positional, how do you call them again? The carrots to go from the end. There is one big thing that you should be using them for, and it's to avoid copy-paste mistakes of using the wrong length. If you have two arrays and you're trying to get that, one very easy thing to do is just, if I need to get two things from the end, I'll just copy the other one and say, yeah, I'm getting two things from the end now. But if I'm using the wrong length, it's going to go to hell. So not having to include the name twice is really, really useful.
I think we covered most of it.
Code and show everybody what this looked like too. So this is the thing you're talking about, right? To grab the last item from the array, the new way to do it.
Yeah, the caret, and then below it's the double dot for the range.
I hope Ryder doesn't decide to display that as from end every time as well. I mean, God bless Ryder, I love you, and I know you have all these powerful features. And yes, I know there's a button to toggle it on and off, but I wish I could selectively choose when it chooses to show the variable declaration names. Because if I'm using a link statement and I've changed 12 methods, it's starting to do this whole like writing an essay next to my link statement, and it really annoys me. And I still want to keep the other ones. I want to keep the like optional variable declaration names. I just don't want an essay return type every. Very annoying.
Yeah. So speaking of Ryder, I was gonna set up the giveaway in just a little bit, and I thought it might be fun for us to just instead of keeping with the classes that we have, just make our own classes right before, and then let people pick. Everybody can make a class, and then they'll battle out and see which one wins. I don't know how we do that and keep it balanced, but.
Is this where you
like I'm insane.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Can I write in my class find object of type for the score management and just keep it adding to it and ignore everything else? Because that's probably
You're gonna hack it.
Hey, if you say it's allowed, you have to define the rules. You know.
You just got to figure out how to do it right.
It's got really glowing with sand. What's up with the yellowish?
Oh, I was messing with the lights and I hadn't finished it. That's all.
Oh well.
Also, that text needs a drop shadow. That text in the corner. We need to fix that. I'm doing UI literally earlier today, so time to start fixing some of the UI stuff.
Making sure this thing works still. But yeah, I thought maybe we'd just go in and maybe we can make 4 classes together. Just kind of show. I thought it'd just be kind of interesting to show the process of how the data is separated out, and that people might find that kind of interesting. If I could close all this other stuff out of the way. Too many windows popping up in my face here.
You already made the classes, though.
What's that?
I see you already made the classes, though.
Oh, no, those are other ones. That was me playing around with allowing them to pledge to people, but I never finished that part. So, or we could just jump in and take some more questions, or do both.
We can probably do both.
You're not going to talk about Sony releasing cars?
Oh no, what's going on there? You want to talk about that a little bit?
That's all I know. Sony's releasing cars. Sony's making cars, real cars.
Interesting.
And
just
they've
like a
spawned
Sony
a brand
car. I
new
guess Apple's
business.
going to try to make a car soon, right?
Everybody's making a car because it's so easy nowadays to make a car that everybody's making a car. So
you just 3D printed it.
Now you get a real life Forza experience.
You just 3D printed. You wouldn't download the car, right?
There is so because of the electric motors and everything, and there's so many sub-manufacturers of all these parts. They literally just buy all the parts, and then they have another manufacturer build the body to their design spec, chuck it on top, and out it goes. So everybody can build a car. It's nuts. But are we going to see Xbox versus PlayStation cars out on the road? That's what like. What's the true platform?
I don't know.
With
Right now,
Apple-
it's
with
going to be
Apple
like
sitting
the
looking really fancy.
iCar versus the Sony. The
Is
PlayStation.
that where Valve comes out with a car, they decide to eschew the steering wheel and give you a giant fucking touchpad?
Isn't Tesla already doing that with the yoke instead of the actual steering wheel?
I don't know. I don't know if Tesla can do anything with the low vert count they have.
Yeah. But I just thought it was funny at CES that they built a brand new business called Sony Mobility, and one of the products is going to be a car.
I did not
Cool.
know that. That's crazy. I guess, it makes sense. If a car company becomes like the most valuable in the world, everybody's going to copy that.
That's the thing. They're all looking at Tesla and they want a piece of that pie.
I just
Yeah,
want
they
to go
wanna
back to
be-
making fucking MP3 players again. God help me, Sony. Back when you made really fun things I enjoyed having. I miss the days when all my electronics didn't look like a black rectangle. I had a whole slew of really fun Sony MP3 players with the bean shapes and all the other wacky stuff. And now technology is horrible and boring, so I don't care
It's
about cars.
easier
Sony.
to stack. It's so much easier to stack things now, though.
True.
Remember having to find a place your drawer was just a mess because everything was round?
And at least we don't have to have a million different unique fucking chargers. Oh my god, the days when everything was this unique custom adapters. I hated it so much.
Wasn't it awesome? Many.
All right, should we make some new classes real quick?
Sure.
You guys want to
So,
try that out? So I pulled up the battler aspects that we have for the classes, and these are the things they're gonna fight, so you can enter to win a rider or a rider key. What should we make the first one? Anybody got thoughts?
I guess I'll just explain how you do this as you go and make the first one, too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if anybody in chat has an idea for a class, let us know. We'll drop it in here.
So,
Fluffy.
There we go. So the first thing you're going to do is right-click this folder and just we have a context menu to create a new scriptable object for a playable class, and it's going to be under game, and then there should be battler aspects and a class battler aspect. And this is
are all the classes we're making, are they going to be battlers, or are we just making classes for the project in general? Like, what's the...
what?
These are player classes. These are like the DPS, the mage, the warrior.
Right. So when you say we're making classes, you mean like literally a playable class, not a class structure class. Okay, because that's where my head was stuck. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So this is a scriptable object that represents a class set of stat changes, display color for how the class will look, the circle under the character, and what valid names will go for this class aspect, and what is its display name. So the asset name itself does not matter. You can name it whatever you want, though I guess if we want to keep it healthy for everyone to find what they're looking for, call it Fluffy.
You want to go with Fluffy or Ninja? I see two ninjas in chat, or we can go with a Fluffy. We'll go with
Let's
Fluffy.
go with a ninja.
It's Fluffy.
Okay, never mind.
Make
We
a
can do
Fluffy,
both.
then we'll make a ninja next.
Yeah. So, as we said, we need a valid name for the class in order to use it. So we already have a first element set up for us. We just need to name it. And it's going to be in lowercase because we turn all the text into lowercase when we process it. So that doesn't matter. We do want a display name for it so everybody knows what you're playing. So name it Fluffy. And you can use an uppercase here, the display color can be whatever you want. Fluffy sounds something nice and...
Yellow.
Let's go with pink or orange,
No, don't do yellow because I've just looked at your background.
So orange or pink works.
Pink.
And then stat changes are that. And when someone types whatever they type, if we find the word Fluffy within their message, this is what we'll assign to them.
So what do you think we should give the Fluffy guys, you guys?
I think
they're the best at attack.
They're Fluffy. Fluffy's the best at attack.
Yeah. I don't know. Usually cats have, like, if we think about cats, they're fluffy usually, and they usually don't deal much damage. But if they crit you, it really, really hurts.
Lions are big and fluffy.
How do you know that?
Main thing going on.
So right now, I'm waiting for global illumination. There we go. Cool. Okay, I lost my spot. Fluffy. The GI was baking in the background, and it's doing it again. I need to turn that off.
So
while you're doing Unity window.
So while you're doing that, you might notice that our project structure has assets / project _ resources, and then / resources / the butler aspects. And the reason we're using a resources folder here is because we want to be able to load all of these classes into memory as soon as we start, and then we filter them out into what's a class, what's a pledge, etc., etc. You wouldn't always do this, and it's not recommended to use the resources for almost anything, but it's convenient, and this is why we're using it here. You wouldn't want to use that with heavy assets because this is going to any build of the game that you make. It's usually good for data because you're going to need this data everywhere. It's part of the game. But not for assets because those might differ between builds. For example, if you have a Switch version, which is a really light hardware and it's not going to be able to support 4K textures, etc., you wouldn't want that in a resources folder. You want that into somewhere that you can load dynamically if it's a PlayStation 4 that can handle it, or the Switch. And the _ for the project is just so we can find our project within all the assets in the folder right at the top very easily.
Yeah, full of asset packs. All right.
Yeah.
So I just increased their hit chance to make them more agile instead.
That's going to be almost no stat change because crit chance is like next to nothing.
Hit
Give it like
chance, not crit
30.
chance.
Oh, hit chance.
Hit chance.
How does that work now? Is it just a plain add to their score?
Let's double check, but I believe so. I think it just gets added on to their roll. The hit chance part just gets added on there.
That's actually really powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's also a flat increase in their crit chance, because crit chance needs you to roll 90 up.
Yeah.
And then you deal triple damage, so we can probably say this.
That's strong enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really strong. Yeah.
All right, so we'll leave the fluffy there with just a higher chance to hit. Let's make another class. What should the next one be?
Struct.
Should we make the ninja?
Yeah, let's go with ninja and then.
Oh, you don't want to use struct.
You want to make a class called struct? Wow, that messes my head a bit.
Make a struct. All right, so we got a ninja. What color should the ninja be?
Something dark.
Go with like a solid black light.
Go with bright fluorescent lime green.
I think it's additive, so you won't even be able to see it. Perfect for stealth.
Gray.
No,
Yeah,
lime
what should
green.
a ninja
Terrible
do?
ninja.
Anybody got preferences on ninja?
Crit
You might
chance.
have to be fast, right? So I guess crit. Yeah. They sneak up and one tap you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just increase.
Give them like 10 crit chance and then 10 crit damage.
10 crit damage and 10 crit chance. Okay. We've
It's
got
going to
our
be pretty
ninja
weak,
made.
like, it's nice.
I agree with Jake. You should make them transparent.
Transparent.
So for the new one, for the new creature, we're going with my favorite cryptid. It's the Bat Squatch. It's like a Sasquatch, but bats.
Bat Squatch?
Bat Squatch, yeah.
Hey, my kids watch Gasquatch. He's a truck Sasquatch on Blazing the Monster Machines.
Does that Bat Squatch hide your bat files from you?
Oh, Jeremy is a good point. You can't have ninjas without pirates. That's like an internet universal law.
Oh
right?
yeah.
Okay.
And then
Well, we've got
zombies
struct
coming
now. So what should the stats be for a struct?
Probably
you're making a struct just to confuse
Some extra
everybody.
health.
Its values never change, so you can basically just set it.
It just default. All right. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, perfect. Nobody's gonna pick that one.
All right, and then let's get that pirate in there. So we'll go make a pirate.
Pirates of the. There you go. Yeah.
Got pirate here. We'll put in pirate here, and pirate here, and then we need a good pirate color. Preferences?
Green,
cyan,
bright fluorescent lime green.
Bright green it is. And then what should a pirate?
I mean, I would have gone blue for Bluebeard, right? But whatever, each to their own.
What are you guys thinking here for stats?
I think
we
a
go
lot
blue.
of max health and attack damage.
Attack damage and health.
Healthy and strong, yeah.
Okay, where is that life max? Give them like an extra.
They're
15,
oranges and
health?
stuff. Yeah,
20%.
sounds about fine. I think 5 attack damage is actually a lot because the base is 10. So that, yeah.
3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be
Cool.
fine.
So now we've got our 3 classes, and then where do we hook these 3 classes up to make them actually work in the game?
We don't. They should be working straight out of the box because we load them from the resources. Yeah.
That means we're also going to have all of the existing classes, right?
Yeah.
Here, let's hit play and see if they all show up real quick. We still have our test characters, so there we go. We've got
Yeah.
all the existing classes and the new ones
Can you
there,
read
and
that?
all of the races. And then the final step is for me to just go grab the live chat ID and then pop that in so we can actually run it and have people win a rider contest or win a rider key. So let's see, YouTube API.
And
Go
I
ahead.
just want to bring up that this kind of testing and adding things, fast iteration is really useful when you're making a prototype. So making something like this, when you can just add an asset and an entire game already knows it exists, load it in, lets you use it, convenient.
It's much easier than having to go in and add another entry or write some code for every single class that you want to add to your game. I mean, I've seen that was kind of like the default way to do it back in the really old days, and then I still see people do it where like they end up writing class specific code for every class that they're building or something, and having to write all of that out. Like every time they want to add something new, they have to go in and change the code, and not having it be very data driven. So
All you need now is to do a video, Jason, on the Unity ML agents and have this test itself and optimize its balance for, millions of iterations of fights and tweak all the numbers.
Feature creep. Feature creep.
What is that your suggestion for the next thing? We've got everything from ninjas to feature creeps. Just a big monster.
Feature creep.
Ruins your project.
need to add features, feature creeps. Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna hit play and see if this thing works. So we'll start it up.
I just realized everyone who's going to talk about classes versus structs right now in the comments are going to become the struct class unknowingly.
Yes, so they're gonna have a discussion about structs.
That's good fun.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. What else have we been talking about?
That's a great trap. I like that. We should add a few more of those in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's brilliant. You got errors.
I need to open up the settings. For
System is running out of memory. That's a new one.
Oh no, the problem is that I haven't installed more RAM on this system, and I've got like 5 Unity projects open that are big, and it's still running on 16 gigs of RAM because I haven't gotten around to opening it up and popping the other RAM in.
Dude, come on.
But the first time I did it, the sticks were too big and they were pushing up against the water cooler. So I had to pull them out and find more RAM, and I haven't gotten around to
Just
putting
rip off
that
the
RAM in.
shrouds.
Get a new one. You can get DDR5 and 256 gigabytes of
Just
RAM.
rip off the shrouds. They aren't necessary.
Oh, they're RGB though, so I don't know if I can
Yeah,
rip them off without
definitely
them
not
breaking.
necessary.
It
We
might-
all
it
love
might break
RGB
more
so
things.
much. Did you see LG's announcement at CES? Obviously, the cool monitor that we're all going to love, 42-inch for gaming, which looks awesome. But they also then promoted this other company's speaker unit. Trying to remember what the company's name was. Ultra Gear. And it was a speaker unit. So you've got this really gorgeous LG thin bezeled like TV. And then you've got this RGB pumping speaker soundbar underneath it from Ultra Gear. And I was like, well, that seems like a marriage made in hell.
It looks like a radiator. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's. I don't know why they would do that with such beautiful TVs. I mean, I have an LG OLED 4K HDR, beautiful TV, and I love it. But I would never put that thing underneath it. Like it just hurts my eyes.
Can you
Well,
drop
you
a
know me
link?
and
I want to
audio,
check it out.
It'll drive me insane when there's so much of this stuff. Like audio, unlike a lot of other stuff, it's not about the visuals of it. It's literally just about, does it sound good? And the fact that you can get good speakers for a couple $100, and there's all of these absolutely crap visual fidelity stuff. It's like speakers are just one of those things. Just go buy, do your research, type in good speakers, pick one of the top 4 on the list, get like an Audio Engine A2 or something, and you'll have great audio forever. And it's got loads of great features, and it's far cheaper than all of these gimmicky crap.
Yeah, with RGB over everything. Like,
yeah, you know what? Buy a good pair of speakers and buy a fucking RGB light strip and glue it to your goddamn good speakers. There you go. You get both. If that's what you really want, give yourself good audio and good lights.
I've posted it. I am not recommending this whatsoever. Like,
so you highly recommend this this new monitor setup with the speaker?
Oh, the monitor. The monitor.
For
the 42-inch OLED LG with all the new gaming preferences on it looks awesome. And I think it's going to be a beautiful monitor for a lot of people. But no, that it's all about the hate for the speaker at the moment.
Yeah, no, that is pretty ugly. And
And
prices.
they're advertising it as being good for games with virtual surrounds. Are you kidding me?
Well, it'd
It's a
probably give you
bar.
extra speed in your sound. The
Oh
sound
yeah,
will come to your
it
ears
got speed
faster.
lines.
Oh,
No, it's dirty. I knew you'd love this story because everything about it. Once you read the features and listen to all the features that they put onto it, all of them are terrible. Like there's not one that's good.
Like they literally have one that says "Be ready for attacks from any side" from your single front-facing strip fucking speaker. Yeah, thank you. I have lots of spatial sound there. Ugh.
It's got all sorts of microphone things as well that sound like they're going to be horrendously overloaded with the sound and all the rest of it. It just just throw it away.
And I hate to say it, like I don't even consider myself particularly good at setting up custom EQs. How many people out there are going to like treat that carefully? It's just going to be the like up the fucking bass and like, you know, I don't know. It's horrible. I have my headphones that go with it. Nice.
all right. So everybody who wants to enter to win, make sure that you do now. We'll kick it off in a few minutes. How many people got in? Only 43 people have entered so far. So to enter, just pick a class and a race, or a class. So you really don't have to pick both, but if you pick both, then you get both. And then you'll show up and then fight. I turned off the randomization, so the people in the front are actually going to fight each other. So it'll be like Aaron versus Jake. And is that Prophet? Is that what that says back there? Versus Mad Liberator. It's hard to read it with the text in the front, but I think it's going to be. I
I
wanted
think the
to
light isn't helping.
Yeah, there's way too much light. I got to turn that all down.
By the way, I just feel like we have to balance the universe. So I'm just going to put these right here. These are half the price of those, and they sound amazing. I need that out there in the world. If you are looking at speakers, even unironically looking at those, get these instead. There you go.
Okay, and which ones are these? A2 home music system. Okay, I've never seen these.
They're great. Not only are they sound great, they're small, they fit nicely on your desk, and they're Bluetooth too, so you can just connect your phone straight to them. They're really good.
Nice.
I have the A5s in the other room and the A2s here. Yeah, they're great too. Yeah.
So I'll drop those in. I did already drop those in chat. Nice. Yeah, I'm using the Sonos ones on my desk, and I thought that since they had Bluetooth, I'd be able to just connect from the PC to Bluetooth. I was very disappointed to find out that is not the case. You can't. Apparently, that used to be possible, and now it's no longer possible. So I ended up having to go out through an optical to HDMI ER cable. It came with the cable for the center thing, but had to use that as the output instead of Bluetooth, which was kind of sad because then it lost like the cool functionality of being able to control it from the speakers and stuff. But anyway, we've got 64 people in here. Do you think we should start when we get to 100, or should we kick it off a little bit before? I don't know if we're going to get 100. We got 100 and something people in chat right now, but they might not all want to win a copy of Rider, or they might not all be able to type. Right? Like sometimes people watch it from their phones and they're like, I imagine trying to type out the word pirate and on a remote control on your phone, on your TV or something.
I guess give them like 5 minutes and then you can start.
22.
20
to the hour.
Sounds like
so to continue on we can continue on the whole CES thing. There's 2 more game dev related things that came out. So obviously Sony VR have announced the brand new. I was going to say the brand new, extremely well named Sony VR 2 because
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, naming conventions and all that. So they're going with eye tracking. It's going to be in there, so you get a better foveated rendering. And the one interesting one is they've got headset haptics.
Interesting. So like it's going to vibrate, or
rumble for your head,
vibrate people's heads. That's what I gathered. I mean, it might be different, but that's what I gathered from what the announcement was. So.
Sure. I mean, ever since we had RGB headphones that you can't see when you're wearing them, sure. Why not? Have whatever you like.
Vibrating headsets. I am looking forward to trying to see how high I can put the haptics on somebody's head when they're using VR. because there's nothing like vibrating, and how that's going to affect the eye tracking and the foveated rendering. That could be real. So how much is this going to shake to lose the eye tracking that then loses the foveated rendering? So now if it's getting it's going to be
Yeah.
awesome
I wonder.
sauce. No, it looks amazing, and it looks like the next gen up. So very excited to see how that moves on.
I will say, after trying the gradiated, the analog sticks, not the analog sticks, the triggers, and on the PS5 controller, I was like, God damn it! I've made fun of rumble and motion stuff for so long that trying something that's actually good was such a surprise that I'm like, okay, this is. I begrudgingly admit, it feels like the first time there's been a technological leap in game controllers since like the first dual analogs. Beyond that point, everything has been a gimmick I didn't care about, but I now want every future controller to have those gradiated triggers. I think it's legitimately a powerful tool that would be nice to have in games.
Yep. Yeah, Sony's done a good job. And then they announced they're teaming up with Epic, though they said Epic, but it's going to be anybody, but to do more virtual production stuff.
That reminds me, there might be a free game today I haven't got. Let me have a look.
Yeah. So for people out there that are looking to get into game development, another big business that's kicking off at the moment is virtual production. So you've seen things like The Mandalorian. And if you haven't watched how The Mandalorian is made, you're doing yourself a real disjustice. Go and watch Injustice, even not disjustice. What the hell did that come from? You're doing yourself an injustice. Go and watch how The Mandalorian is made in virtual production sets. That stuff is big business. There are masses of jobs coming out for it. I done a load of stuff for the NFL and with broadcast rendering and stuff with game engines. It's a big business. So go and check it out.
And by the way, if you're not familiar with why that's big business, because it's something you don't think about unless you're either involved with it or you follow film. But the world is becoming more and more CG with film, right? You look at a Marvel movie, the actors on set have nothing to work with. They're basically talking to, golf balls on a stick. There's nothing, there's running jokes of footage behind the scenes of things where you're supposed to act scared of like literally nothing. Like they'll hold something up just to shake it to give you some eye line. And so the modern generations of recording where you can have the actors have a previs of the environment, literally something they can see and stand in, is not a small deal, right? It's going to completely revolutionize the film industry when you can have the actors not only for the actual post-processing and quality of recording, but it makes the act of capturing footage so much easier and so much better, and it makes it easier for actors to do their job. So it's one of the few times I look at, like, there's a lot of gimmicky uses of VR. Like, don't get me wrong, the whole architecture angle ended up being, like, I still think it's valuable in certain cases, but there was a boom where the minute VR came out, every architecture firm in the world wanted some nonsense architecture thing, and now only certain ones have actually chose to engage with it, and those ones are good, and the rest of it fell by the wayside. And same with film. Is there going to be a lot of gimmicky stuff for a while, but I honestly think it's going to fundamentally change that industry once it's adopted correctly.
But with the virtual production, I'm also talking about the screens that sit behind the Mandalorian and the person
the
being in the
cave
world
style giant
and
background
the
world. Yeah.
And the other thing about because of course they've all got lights that are linked up to this entire world as well, so they turn the world itself. And then with the game engine, that's talking to the lights that are lighting the characters, the real actors, and so you get realistic lighting on the character in regards to the world that's behind them as well. And it's stuff you could do at home. I mean, you could do this stuff at home with
if
cool
you're looking for a
trackers
quick Googleable term, Google the term VR cave, and you'll find a whole load of older like this stuff is older than all of the other VR stuff we're talking about. People used to set up projectors, multi-rooms, and you track the positions. There's a lot of really interesting stuff you can do. Like literally you can have 2 Kinects and a couple of projectors, and you can have an entire room that moves as you walk around it and changes stuff. So I'd say something to look into if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, can you make me one of those, Dave?
Yes. I'm making one in here. It's on the list of things for the Future Office project that I've got going, and it's to actually make this a virtual production as well, so I can do that. So it's in the works. I've done some testing and things, and it all works quite well using trackers and the like. So
nice. All right, well, I'm going to kick off the battle, and we'll see who wins. If you haven't entered already, hopefully you type this before I hit the button and pick a race in the class and jump in.
And hopefully you don't run out of memory.
Now with, what do we got, 86 people? And I expect to see, there we go, yeah, no randomization. That's what I want. I want to see who's going out to fight before they fight so they can get ready. So Relax and Michael are next. Yeah. Relax, Enjoy Life. That's a nice long name. All right, so the battle's begun, and I have no idea what class is going to win. Do you guys have any predictions on what class type you think is going to win? I have the races here. I really need to switch.
Struct.
I think Struct is definitely losing. We got no bonus.
No, it's the one I
And we
picked.
didn't give any downsides to any of
the underdog. They should, maybe they'll surprise
the one I
us.
picked. There's a bug in the code. Well,
No,
if your eye did what I asked him to do and I paid him and put in there that if everything's 0, it boosts everything way higher, then
it doubles it.
Double
zero.
Double zero. yeah, Jason, it does that. Yeah.
So that, you weren't specific. You said raise it up.
Yeah, I know.
Use a multiplier. So yeah, there we go. We got a couple rounds out. Who's win? I haven't been paying attention to what classes have been winning yet. Oh, I changed pirates to be green because we had mages that were still blue. I don't know if we have many mages in there, but I wanted to make sure
we can have multiple shades of blue.
We could, but I couldn't tell the difference, and I couldn't tell which one it was. So I was like, "Oh,
so is Fluffy the pink ones?
Fluffy is pinks.
Oh, there's a lot of pinks.
It's a lot of
I'm gonna have to do it. It'll drive me insane if I see this one more time with this UI. I'm gonna have to do a pass because the text doesn't even have.
Can't read anything.
It doesn't have outlines. There's no drop shadows.
Beautiful. What are you talking about?
Killing me, absolutely killing me.
Yeah. It does need some love.
If I had more time, I'd help you guys.
I'll add it to my Marvin, and I'll make a note.
If you want the feature creep, though, you can make a version of the arena that has a night mode and a day mode, and then you can swap it out every stream.
Isn't it indoors?
It is.
You can have an open ceiling.
The air conditioner.
There can be an open ceiling in the moonlight or sunlight going on.
Looks like there's a sunlight from the way he's ballooned that right up to the...
Yeah, it's either that or the ray of destruction that's coming to wipe everyone out.
Just comes down and blows.
Because the light is
up.
kind of searing in the eyes.
It's just going to be Salim popping.
If I had more time, I'd come in and fix your lighting and make it so that it didn't look like an animal is urinated in every corner.
Yeah, this is actually I think it was the default, and then I was starting to go around, and I was going to do a quick video on optimization showing how to get rid of all the extra lights, how to do some baking, including culling, and a couple other quick tips on how to take this from 20 to 100 frames a second with minimal work. But I didn't finish it, so it's the partially done. It started going, and I never got around to wrapping it up part. So the lights are a bit messed up, and a couple other things are in a slightly weird state, but everything's functional still. Made sure not to break anything. Just speed it up a little bit.
What color did you
switch me on my mind because I'm currently doing some HUD, first-person shooter HUD stuff, so it's on my mind.
You say you're doing a first-person shooter. The Struct is light gray. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Jason, about a first-person shooter?
Yeah, no, I was just saying I was literally minutes before this call. I was doing some UI HUD stuff for the basic layout of a first-person shooter. So the call-outs, the cursor, the health section, doing the do tween animations to swipe them in, and have the cursor highlight and change color when you raycast things. So I was just tidying a bunch of that stuff up and going through the text and having very similar issues with trying to get text to read against changing background scenes of gameplay environments. And so I look at that text and I just think just give it an outline and a little bit of a drop shadow. Just all it needs. It's driving me insane.
Yeah. Small change. This is actually, I think, just the default font from TextMesh Pro. It's literally unchanged, completely unchanged, just some colors picked. I don't think. Actually, it looks like there might be a little bit of a drop shadow on these ones. I don't know if that was in there by default or somebody added that.
I would probably dump a load of this text as well. Once the game started, I'd get rid of all the classes and all the rest, and so you could have two views: a view that starts off with everybody picking their class and they're seeing what's coming up and all the rest of it, and then when it started, whoop, just whomp all that stuff out.
Well, it'd be nice if YouTube would eventually start adding commands like Twitch has, and we could have like query the list of options and stuff and post messages into the chat automatically from bots. That'd be quite nice.
Yeah, I think you technically can. I think you can do some posting and stuff, but I don't think you can do very much things. But I haven't played with it very much. There was a lot of stuff in the API you could do, but I don't remember. I think you can post to chat and a couple other things. I know you could like create streams and modify them and do other stuff.
Well, I mean more like per user, right? Because, for example, a common trope in Twitch chats is you can have a list of default commands like ask people equipment ? And it'll automatically dump you whatever that person's equipment is. It's very handy when people ask the same common question. So you could have stuff like, classes ? And it would just give that person on their screen only the list of
just
direct chat or whatever it would be. Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense. I wonder if they'll do something like that. And probably eventually. And it's tech company, so they'll copy everybody else's tech eventually. What are we down to? 34 people left? Yeah, that is it's even hard to find it up there with all the stuff going on.
Well, you've also got lots of yellow text on a very yellow world.
Is that not ideal? It's supposed to be gray on gray, right?
Yeah.
You're going to do like dark blue
shades of gray. Shades of gray. No.
Yeah, it just I think the lighting just got way blown out here.
Yeah,
just haven't had a
that's fine. I mean, everybody should know this is something that they're developing and it's a work in progress. Who's working on it at the moment?
Almost no one.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just random.
You're
Get an idea, like, hey, let's go toss this idea in there just to play around and experiment. Really.
Yeah, so it's really when I have free time, I have to choose between a million things, and sometimes I dedicate a bit of it to that. But the start of this week was completely hectic for me.
All I did was add the health bar code like 2 weeks back, and then nobody integrated it, so it's still just hovering there in the project.
You didn't do the integration part.
Well, I mean, we have something that's working here, literally.
Yeah. Has any strut actually won a fight yet?
I don't know. That's what I wish was here, is the actual remaining classes instead of the races, since there are differences.
Well, we can add a counter.
Yeah, that's what this could have easily been that. Maybe next time around, that in like a quick overview or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something you can show and hide, so it's not always in the way. But if you want to check,
that might be cool. Just some stats windows that you can see.
Yeah. Well, like I said, depending on my time availability next week, I will actively make a note to do some UI stuff on this between now and next week.
Cool. Yeah, it's a fun one to work on because like there's no downside if anything goes wrong. It's those projects where you can just go like play with an idea, and if something goes terribly wrong, it doesn't matter at all.
And if it goes okay, you can show it to everyone and hope it doesn't crash.
If it goes good, you can show it to 500 people next week. Like, hey, this is a cool idea. We're down to 18 fighters left. I saw Dave got knocked out. Were any of you guys in here?
I'm not.
I should have been. I was.
Hang on. What do you mean I got knocked out? I paid Uri good money to make sure that didn't.
He fucked it up, dude. It didn't work. There's no
exactly as designed.
He multiplied your zeros just like you asked for.
He took your money and didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Worked exactly to the specification. Nothing more, nothing less.
Seriously though, if we are talking about light, another cool thing that was shown in the CES is the new QD OLED TV, which, if you don't know, it's about it splits blue light into the other wavelengths of light, so it ends up being way brighter, and the colors get to pop out more, which was really interesting to see and understand how it works. I'm still not seeing an incentive to get a television in my own home, but it was a nice thing to see. And the searing light here might benefit from it.
Just get one of those really nice OLED monitors and then just use that as your TV.
Yeah, those QD OLEDs look nice.
That's
Did you see
the-
the Linus video on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good.
Honestly, I just wanted one of those the frame TVs, you know, those really sleek ones that sit in
The
the back
Samsung
wall.
ones.
That's
Yeah,
what-
that just
that's
look
My
what
like
wife
there.
loves them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife really
Oh,
likes
I'm
those.
back again. Here we go.
Are you back in
Moment
the
of truth.
Okay.
Where are you? I can't read your name.
He's in the
I'm
back left. Jason
back left.
Story versus James. Oh, he's got extra health there. Oh, yeah, I think Jason's got this. All right, Jason, you ready to win?
Yeah, this is
pirate.
easy. Nailed it. Yeah. Nice little backflip. Even looks like a little pirate. I like it.
We got
Even with
mostly
pirate
fluffies
hats.
and pirates left, huh? Is that it? Is it all fluffy and pirate? It is. Oh wait, no. Who's what's Sam there? Oh, he is a struct, right? Or a class.
Ours actually made it.
Or maybe it's
Two
a ninja.
No.
He might
There's
be a
two
ninja.
structs. Oh,
He's
yeah,
darker.
right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think you got killed by a ninja.
Oh well.
Oh, sorry, Jason.
No rider license for you.
Next week.
Oh well.
Come back next week and try again.
You have to be like me and just stay with Visual Studio.
You got to use Notepad++, Dave. You can tell everybody. Upgrade. You know, I've met a lot of people who coded in Notepad in the days. It was really scary.
I'm slightly guilty as charged here because I have a modded Notepad too, which shows, which highlights all the syntax and stuff for me depending on the file extensions.
He coded
Whenever
Notepad so he could code.
Whenever I want to like just give someone a piece of code and I don't want to use Discord for it, like when I'm typing it out, I'll just open my modded Notepad, code there, and just paste it there. It's convenient.
I really miss Sublime Text. That was my favorite for years. It was the one I used to love, and then I switched to VS Code because it's just got the most amount of development in it. It's just the best right now for amount of plugins and resources and whatever. But stylistically, I always loved Sublime Text.
It's all about Emacs.
All right, final fight.
And it's two pirates.
Two pirates. Yeah, the pirates definitely got the boots. Everybody saw the classes, though. So, got Mike. I can't even read the name. It's so.
You're not going to know who wins.
We got
You might
two
want to get with the
people
pause
left,
button.
and one of them, it looks like Michael is gonna win. Maybe,
Pause
maybe
button
not.
and then
We'll
look it
watch
up the
come back.
component.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
that would have been a hilarious.
There we
comeback.
go.
All right, Michael
Kilmer.
congrats.
Oh, of course you put the
Send me an email, jason@game.courses, and I'll send you over the code in just a little bit. Congrats again, though. Yeah, we're gonna have to balance out these classes. Maybe we make new classes next time. Oh man, it definitely makes for a much more fun giveaway than than just randomly picking or choosing a name from a list. So if you want to win, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe so you can come back next week, since you missed the chance already. But yeah, come back next week and we'll do some more. You guys got anything else you wanted to share or talk about while we wrap things up? Last few minutes.
So I just put that tutorial live. So I will pump a link in there. So yeah, that's ready to go. Having a dialogue with Unity.
All right, and it's about creating
Catchy
dialogue
names.
windows.
I was gonna say
and-
you're enjoying the names way too much, man. These puns are ridiculous.
Oh, come on. You like arguments with Unity, dialogue with Unity. What was the other crazy one I came up with? I don't know. There was one other one. I think it's one that I haven't put out yet. So you got one to look up for.
Just save it.
Anticipation.
Cool. Well, thanks, I guess, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate having you all here. We'll see you again next week, I guess. Andrew wanted me to share my affiliate link. I asked him if there's anything. So go check out his assets with my affiliate link down below in the Unity Asset Store sale. There's, I think, 2 days left for the New Year sale, and then it ends. I think it's Tuesday is the last day. So if you want to go grab some stuff,
right.
Now's the chance. personally, I've been grabbing a lot of art assets. I've been trying to build out a space station, so I grabbed like 5 or 10 different space stations. They were all on sale. I was like, this is
that's
awesome.
funny. I'm working on a project where we're building a space station as we speak, so I might hit you up for which ones you're linking to, because
We
we
need to
just
talk.
download a bunch of assets. Yeah.
Literally all my games are in space. Like, I have a ton of them.
I feel left out.
Yeah, get some space stations.
So you
Everybody
want to
else
make a
has
space game, Uri? Terraria in space.
That can be the first video on your YouTube channel, talking about the new space game you're making.
Yes.
Uh,
But yeah, thanks again,
I'll
everybody.
just be busy with the deck, the Steam Deck, that is.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Make sure that you go check out Dave's video. I just linked it again in chat, and I'll make sure that it's down in the description as well. Check out all of the other links. Come back next week, and we'll talk some more about game dev
Space
stuff.
update.
Yeah, Terraria space update. And yeah, I think that's it. Any final words, guys?
Thank you so very much for all the game dev shows through the past year, and I hope this year is going to be amazing.
Oh, well, hey, thanks for being an awesome part of it. And yeah, thanks everybody for being out here and being with us. So I guess we'll see y'all next week. Bye. I figured out how to wave. I lost my mouse now.